This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
I don't hear too many bullish cases for China in 2025.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump took steps on everything from TikTok to the southern border.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. It's Fed Day.
It is.
Of course, 1:30 today. The Fed decides. We'll do that for you. First thing I did is I modeled economic growth coming in.
Okay.
Good look. After that, I had a Tang Mimosa.
Good, very good.
No clue.
Never too early.
Where is real GDP right now?
I don't know. I don't know where the economic outlook is for a lot of these folks.
Yeah.
I don't know where the inflation outlook is now. The last 2 months have thrown everything a little bit into uncertainty, and I think we're seeing that in the markets so far this year.
We'll see it in with recovery today, but how much is that good for? Wait for the first headline out of Washington. A really eclectic day for you. We're going to start strong with Sebastien Page at Rowe Price here coming up in a moment. Let's get right to it. Futures up 14. The VIX, I'm sorry, it's pretty much stable given the gyrations headline to headline. Certainly we witnessed that yesterday as well. But a great lineup, Stephen Englander and Jane Foley on foreign exchange, and particularly the upset in Ankara and Istanbul. We'll get to that. Turkish Lira out 2 big figures this morning. Weaker Turkish Lira. The Sweeney yield, 4.05%, is certainly a shift over the last week. Let's get right to it from the Interactive Broker Studios. The Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got some small move to futures on this Fed day. Our coverage, of course, of the Fed's decision and interest rates begins at 1:30 Wall Street time. Be sure to tune in. We'll start with NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 54 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 13 points. Dow futures little changed, up about 37. The 2-year yield, 4.05%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.29%. And that is little change. Tom mentioned it because the Turkish Lira, the main mover in currency markets, it plunged more than 10% after authorities detained President Erdogan's political rival. So it was, right now it's down nearly 5% at 38.3792 against the dollar. Heading over to the euro, down about 0.4% at 109.0 against the dollar. We go to the yen, the Japanese yen down about 0.3%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.3%. Over to commodities, gold extending a record high. We have COMEX gold at $3,042 an ounce. Yeah, Brent crude over to oil right now, $70 a barrel. WTI crude, $66 a barrel. A lot of banking news this morning. Morgan Stanley planning to cut about 2,000 employees later this month to keep a lid on costs. Sources saying the firm's financial advisors will not be affected. And Citigroup slashing bonuses tied to the bank's turnaround for hundreds of top executives. And finally, JP Morgan raised its quarterly dividend by 12%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Sebastien Page joining us right now. We got 3 things to talk about with him. And of course, Rowe Price had a multi-asset chair of asset allocation. And, you know, that's the focus of the discussion. We got to talk about his Canada, so much in the news right now. But I got to put this book up. This is out in a couple weeks. It's Book of the Month Club, Reader's Digest. The Psychology of Leadership.
Boom. Coming
out. Bonus round, weekend readable.
Yep.
It's got the right length to it. But what completely separates this book is you have, forget about the book of the year. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I haven't read it yet. You have the forward of the year. How did you get Larry Culp to give you the forward to your book?
I cold called him, and he was kind enough to accept to participate. Larry was on the board of directors for a while for Rowe Price. And I use every connection I could get to try to get to him to ask him for this favor.
What are the best practices of Mr. Culp at Rowe Price, at Danaher, and the miracle he's wrought at Generous Electric? What are the Culp best practices?
He's really into the Japanese approach to quality and Kaizen, and he's really into listening to the customer. I remember, Tom, I had to present to the board once about my business, and the stories in my book, but I presented a range in terms of my growth forecast for our business. And the range was pretty wide. Larry Culp would not have it. He said, what is your goal? You know, so there's a lot of discussions around that.
Our goal right now is mental stability with our portfolios. Lisa's medicated. But what do we do with this uncertainty out there right now? How do you approach that?
We're not panicking, Tom. I think markets, the economy, I think we're going to be okay. We're looking at a slowdown. The data for the consumer is showing that things are slowing down. And the markets is selling off, but it's not just because of tariff headlines. It's because of the growth slowdown. It's because we had extremely high valuations going into this. And yes, the word of the hour, uncertainty. So it's a combination of all these things, but I don't think we're getting a recession.
How about the consumer? We've seen some University of Michigan data last week, which was a little concerning. We had the airlines take their guidance down, forward guidance down. We had a big, broad department store like Kohl's take its guidance down. How do you think the consumer's doing these days?
So I don't like the last two retail sales prints. The last one was positive, but still below expectation. The one before was revised minus 1.2% month over month. Those two data points are not good, and they're showing some slowdown. Overall, the economic surprise index in the U.S. is in negative territory. But I'm not counting the U.S. consumer out yet. Unemployment at 4.1% is a low number for unemployment. Wages for the last 12 months are growing at 4% and inflation's at 3%. This means that wages are growing faster than inflation. And I know it's it's really not distributed equally, but the aggregate shape of the consumer is quite good. The level of household debt to GDP is near a 20-year low. Again, not every not every segment of the consumer is healthy, but in aggregate, I'm not counting it out.
You're head of global multi-asset, so you can go anywhere. Where are you going these days? What are you talking to your portfolio managers about?
Going into this, we had been adding to Europe, to international stocks on the value side. It turns out right now it's maybe, aside from gold, the best performing asset class year to date. It's up 13%, and we're likely to continue to add. European banks, for example, used to trade at 2 times their book value prior to the global financial crisis. They're at 1x their book value. So we think there are opportunities there with positive interest rates.
So as we think about these, a 10% pullback, let's call it an 8% pullback in the S&P, maybe a 12% pullback in NASDAQ. Buying opportunity, buy the dip, be cautious. What are we doing here?
So we've been de-risking, but we're at kind of neutral on risk assets right now. We're waiting it out. If the VIX goes to 30 and stocks sell off 15, 20%, we're more likely to buy than to sell. So that's what we're kind of watching right now.
I'm kind of hearing that a lot. Like, we had Stuart Kaiser from Citigroup on from the trading desk there at Citi. He's not buying here, but he's like, we're close. I mean, but to me, it seems like it's kind of all about the earnings out there. If the consumer's pulling back, if there's a lot of uncertainty out there, I'm not sure I can depend upon those earnings numbers that I see out there on the street.
It's interesting to compare the U.S. with Europe right now because the earnings estimates in Europe are trending up and the surprises are looking good, better than in the U.S. And then you look at profitability of European stocks, it's on the way up, whereas in the U.S., it's stabilizing.
It's stabilizing. We got a couple things to do here, but Sebastien Page, I got to ask this right now. There's so much uncertainty out there. All my radar says that's a massive opportunity. Define the opportunity that comes out of any given uncertainty.
Uncertainty up, stocks down, usually. Yep. And historically, when there's panic in the market, I know, Tom, you like to watch the VIX. When the VIX hits 30, historically, it's a good time. It's a good time to look for opportunities. We like non-U.S. value stocks because you have a valuation advantage. You have short-term momentum, and that short-term momentum is supported by fundamentals.
Okay, so you knew, Paul, years ago, that you looked at Canton, which was the best school in northern New York. You could literally hear the St. Lawrence River, whatever, up north there. Or Clarkson, which was solid G1 hockey. And they'd have 6 ringers from Quebec on there. You don't know this, folks, but Sebastien Page looks like that left wing you hated on the other team. He spoke perfect English, but when he stepped on the ice, he'd only speak French, so you were even more intimidated by him. You grew up in the heart of it. You go from Victoriaville down through Windsor to the land of hockey sticks, Sherbrooke, Quebec.
Yeah.
Is your Quebec going to be on board with Mark Carney in this battle with the United States?
You know, I started playing ice hockey at the age of 5. That you have to do that in Quebec. I'm kind of conflicted because I have dual citizenship, U.S. and Canada. I think things were normalized. We just have to be patient, wait some of it out, and just go along with a good faith negotiation. And again, my heart is in both places.
So what'd you do in the hockey game here the other day, U.S. Canada? It was great.
There was theater. Yeah. Well, you know, when I swear and I watch hockey, I swear in French.
Yes. See, there you go.
Well, Lisa swears in French when I miss my cue. I got to ask. We got to get to Jane Foley here, but this is too important. Victoriaville, CCM 5-stripe, or did you go with the local Sherwood?
The local Sherwood.
Got it. I had
the best hockey sticks.
I had the Victoriaville toe curve. It was the only thing. I'd pay a lot of money now.
Yeah, we used to heat it up and curve it exactly with the right angle.
Hockey people are nuts.
You get the blowtorch out. Your mother would be like, "Don't burn up the basement." Jane Foley's in London going, "What in God's name are they talking about?" Sebastien Page, thank you so much. Book The Psychology of Leadership is the book. This will be out soon. You can't get it today. Lawrence Culp with the introduction to The Psychology of Leadership. Patient is Jane Foley. She is in Rabobank. We really appreciate her coming on short notice. I don't want to do a international relations bit, Jane Foley, on Turkish Lira out two big figures, 36 to 38, but it's destabilizing within an emerging market disaster, idiosyncratic disaster. What does it signal to the people of Turkey to see such an abrupt weakening?
Well, of course, this is related again to the idea that Erdogan is reasserting a more authoritarian rule. Certainly over the last few weeks, I suppose that there has been a lead up to this, not a huge surprise. But of course, Erdogan needs to have an early presidential election if he wants to win again. And it looks as if he's taken out some of his main opposition. Now, from the market's point of view, of course, there is a fear that this could be a return to unorthodox policies too. But of course, for Europe, there's something else as well. And this is all related back to Turkey's want potentially to become a member of the EU, but also what we've been seeing this year in terms of NATO, Europe, of course, having to step up in a much bigger way for its own defence, and Turkey putting out there the possibility that it, with its second largest army within NATO, could play a greater function in that defence if perhaps it had a little bit more power within the EU. So that is something which I think has created more uncertainty in politics in Europe.
Paul says enough talk on Turkey. Paul wants to know what the euro's going to do for travels this summer. Are we going to actually model out a euro to 115, stronger euro?
Well, we've got 112 as our target.
Oh, there you go, Paul. Cancel that trip.
Exactly.
But I would say that when with your previous guest you were talking about U.S. stocks. I think to put it in context, one of the biggest changes for the markets this year has been the news regarding German fiscal policy and the movement higher in terms of GDP that we've seen for some German big forecasters now, not for this year, but for next year and the year after. That's a real sea change for Europe. And of course, we've seen a big sea change in China too. And that, of course, with DeepSeek, but also the BYD battery system that we've heard about this week too for autos. And I think these two things have really created, a lot of change in terms of what investors are looking at in terms of investment opportunities. Last year, it seemed to be just about the US. Now people are thinking, did I overlook Europe? Did I overlook China? There are opportunities there which I didn't realize were potentially there last year. So this is really significant, and that is why the euro is looking a lot better, even though some of that money may not be spent immediately. It is coming in Germany, and that's a huge difference.
Pound sterling's had a nice kind of run here this year as well. Here, what's driving that, Jane, and kind of how do you think about that going forward?
Well, cable certainly had a jitters right at the beginning of the year, partly related, of course, to US yields dragging, gilt yields high, but also the poor growth outlook, which doesn't look good for government finances, which of course is strained in the UK. Now, cable has gone higher since then, but that's largely related to the weakness of the dollar, to be honest. Right. I think the euro story has meant that sterling is going to struggle now to win more ground back against the euro. But there is a statement, a budget statement, or the spring statement, I should say, on March the 26th. The government really going to have to come back on spending in order to play by its fiscal rules. So, but I think sterling is out of the limelight, given that the news has been so much about Germany within Europe this year.
Jane Foley, on short notice, we really appreciate it. Team Surveillance appreciates your effort this morning. With Rabobank, Jane Foley in London again. Erdogan with some political news and very important domestic news in Turkey. And Lira goes 36 and a managed 36. Jump condition out to 38.24, a weaker Turkish lira. Futures up 16 on this Fed day with our news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will speak with President Donald Trump by phone today following Trump's conversation with Russian leader Vladimir Putin that failed to secure a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. Zelensky stated that Ukraine will never recognize territories occupied by Moscow as Russian and that the size of his army shouldn't be a subject for talks with Putin. Meanwhile, air attacks between Russia and Ukraine have continued after President Putin rejected a comprehensive ceasefire with President Trump. Ukrainian parliament member Lisa Yasko said they want peace.
We do believe that there is an attempt coming from international security to end this war. And as much as this leadership from Europe and other countries will grow in a real will to end war with real security guarantees, if it happens, then of course we are optimistic. But at this stage, if it all relies on the answer of Putin, we are very skeptical.
President Zelensky also said that promises from Putin to stop strikes on energy infrastructure won't be enough for Ukraine to hold its attacks against Russian oil assets. A federal judge ruled that the dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development likely violated the Constitution in an order that blocked Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency from making further cuts to the agency. The judge ordered the Trump administration to restore email and computer access to all employees of USAID. Finally, 2 NASA astronauts whose 8-day stopover on the International Space Station turned into a 9.5-month mission are finally back on Earth. SpaceX Dragon Freedom splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, Tuesday, carrying Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore. NASA's Steve Stitch says the Crew 9 return and splashdown could not have gone any better.
The crew's doing great. They'll spend a little time on the recovery ship getting checked out, making sure that they're healthy and ready to go, and then eventually they'll make their way back to Houston.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Dodged a bullet. I had St. Francis, Pennsylvania, penciled in. Dodged that bullet.
I was rooting for him, too.
Right? Yeah, it's great. But I loved it at a school like Alabama State with their heritage down there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Get some FaceTime. They play Auburn, right?
Yeah, that's gonna be
Auburn's a little better.
A little different story there.
Yeah.
North Carolina Tar Heels.
They did as well.
Callie Cox's school.
What was your review of that?
I thought they played well. They played really well. I don't know.
Lisa, how's your bracket? Come on, how's your bracket? Come on.
It can't be busted already because I didn't even do one.
You got to do it. Can you help her on a break? Wait.
We'll get started with who?
Who in the control room can help Lisa Mateo with her bracket?
She doesn't need help.
Ari? Okay. You get the Ari edge.
Thank you.
Ari's actually competent.
Oh, you're going to win this, man.
So I don't pick about the colors of the uniforms?
We need to have all of our, Cy, Ken, everybody on Team Surveillance has to do their bracket. Guaranteed I'll be in last place. Let's start with that. Lisa, seriously, you got to talk to Ari and get that puppy set up here. Okay. Right. Why don't you go with all the teams within 1 mile of a Costco?
Yes.
So.
There you go.
That's probably as good a theory. strategy right now. It's a lot of fun. The cutoff date's when? Tomorrow?
Yeah,
12-ish?
Yeah. Right around noon.
I'm sort of locked in. I mean, I got to go back and review it today,
I know. It's going to be good. It's going to be solid.
And Mr. Buffet's given $1 million to Lisa Mateo.
Oh, okay, good. Very good.
Don't spend it.
I was really going to fill mine out yesterday, and then the furnace went out. Went out. So then I had to take care of that and all this. Then the car needed brakes, and I'm like, oh man, this is like. So I got to
give this excuses. Get it, do it like I do. Just pick the blue teams and move on. That's how UCLA's in. Anyways, we're having fun with it. We hope you are too across America.
BRKT,
for our international audience, it's lost in translation.
Yes, exactly. They have no idea what we're talking about.
We say good morning and good evening on the Pacific Rim this morning. Good evening in India as well. We are truly humbled by the global audience that YouTube gives us. Here's the game. Bloomberg podcasts out on YouTube, all the different interviews. Joe Weisenthal, Tracy Alloway there, David Gura in the Big Take as well. YouTube, Bloomberg Podcasts. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures, on the rise right now. This is following another day of losses on Wall Street. Mega cap tech stocks led the markets lower. NVIDIA was a part of that after the stock closed down more than 3% yesterday. CEO Jensen Huang, he spoke at his annual developers conference, unveiled new AI chips and technology, but investors, I guess, weren't impressed. This morning, though, shares are on the rebound. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, S&P futures up 0.2%, Dow futures up 0.1%. The two-year yield, 4.05%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that is little change. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.3%. We have some insight on the housing market. The MBA says the average 30-year mortgage rate rose for the first time since early January to 6.72% last week. That caused a pullback in refinancing and purchase activity. Now we go to earnings. Shares of Kay Jewelers owner Signet Jewelers on the rise are up 15%. The company says sales are rebounding after a weak holiday. And General Mills, the maker of Lucky Charms, Yoplait yogurt, it cut its guidance for fiscal 2025 sales. Retailer inventory, that's what it's pointing to. Also, people snacking less. Its shares are off about 3%. And Chinese video game and social media company Tencent's revenue grew at the fastest pace in over a year. Gaming is big, but shares are down this morning. ADR's off about 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Fish is up 16. Fed day 1:30. I talked to Pharaoh yesterday. Mm-hmm. His people lined up a call with him. You got to go through 6 people to talk to Pharaoh. We're pumped. I mean, I have no idea 131 what we'll talk about, but there it is.
With this Fed, we'll hear from the Fed, but I'm not sure what impact they're going to have on the market. It's going to be interesting because it seems to be what's coming out of Washington, D.C. these days.
They got a dual mandate, and it's not the headline to headline.
Right.
I saw 4 consecutive headlines yesterday. I think it was lined up in the Washington Post. I'm like, there's never. I mean, Zachary Taylor didn't have to deal with this, or William McKinley, whatever. This is a joy. It's that time of year, folks, where parents, their kids get into 6 schools. And if you come out of New York City, and it's 181 miles, you go across, you go through the Delaware Gap. You've been through the Delaware Gap a million times. You pop up 81, and it's not Binghamton, folks. That's what Pharaoh would call it.
Right.
It's Binghamton. It is the single best public school east to whatever. It is spectacular. From SUNY Binghamton, Max Grinikoff joins us right now. He's with UBS in derivatives. What is the pixie dust up there? Why is SUNY Binghamton so famous academically?
I think it's underappreciated. It's underrated. I say that.
Is it
biased,
like there's
obviously.
some guy whipping the faculty? Let's go. Nobody gets an A.
It's two things. One, it's the drive that I felt like I needed to have, especially going to school through the Great Recession in 2008. But it's also kind of the soft skills and learning just how to talk, talk markets.
You and I were talking about the OVD function. We're not going to go into it, folks. There's too much math involved for radio. But you look at the derivative processes right now. Are they working, or is the system busted?
It's working, and quite honestly, people are looking at the price action last week between markets and volatility and saying, VIX completely underreacted, right? VIX is broken again. I don't think so. I actually think the move was very healthy, but also very warranted given the kind of prevailing macro environment. I think a lot of investors have recency bias with respect to what happened on August 5th of last year, even December FOMC last year. But in those instances, the market had set itself up for failure with respect to investors being much less defensively positioned. Index hedging was kind of out the window. Heading into the macro boiling over, since the start of the year, investors were more defensively positioned. Dealers were relatively longer gamma, so they were kind of keeping.
What's gamma?
So when we talk about gamma, and sorry to get into a little bit into the weeds, what we've been talking about is, given the options activity from investors, both on the put side and the call side, given that demand for index protection had waned, investors are buying less puts. That leaves dealers and market makers less short those puts, right? So when the market sells off, how much do dealers and market makers have to sell into that, adding fuel to the fire? That exposure was much less sort of heading into this macro boiling over.
Do you realize somebody just drove off the road on I-81 near Carbondale? Exactly. I mean, the Greek letters, it's too much as well. What's a mere mortal do right now with the oddities of the market, with gamma out of whack, delta, alpha, beta, vega, OMG, the theta? Our audience doesn't get the Greek letters, but what do the Greek letters say now about how our expectations have changed?
So right now, we think this is more fundamental, actually. It's less Greeky, if you will. We believe this is a fundamental re-rating higher in volatility, given the prevailing macro environment.
So if the VIX nirvana is 12, 13, 14, what's the new nirvana? 18?
Our models, but also our intuition tells us 20 to 25 is probably fair.
20 is the new...
20 is the new 12.
20 is the new, that's a headline.
Yeah. 20 is the new 12.
20
it's a new
is the
world.
new 12?
Yeah. That's what our models tell us.
Let me cut to the race. Sweeney's going to ask it. Should we then go to cash?
So it's very interesting, and this is what we've been studying over the last several weeks with respect to not just rotation under the surface within the U.S., but rotation globally, right, into Europe, into China, out of the U.S., right? If an investor is long U.S. equities and they sense fear, they can buy a put to hedge themselves, right? You buy a put, the price of put protection goes up, skew blows out, VIX blows out, right? That's kind of what you saw heading into August 5th. Now, it's a little different. Investors are actually reducing U.S. equity exposure. They're not necessarily hedging that exposure, they're reducing equity exposure. That's their hedge, right? And rotating into other regions like Europe and China, right? That's not a volatility event. That's a market downturn event, which is kind of what you've seen. Nevertheless, S&P down, peak to trough, down 10%, VIX up 13 or 14 points. That's still a very healthy move. Again, I think people were looking at August 5th and expecting this massive volatility reaction. Like I said, the market was not set up for that. We weren't pounding the alarm.
Is this a longer-term view from your clients? Are your clients longer term? I don't know how you define longer term. 6, 12 months negative on the U.S. market vis-a-vis other markets?
It's interesting, right? So I think people are looking at, the AI dominance story, right?
Yep.
And basically saying if this continues, right, we've already kind of, sort of derated lower in terms of valuations. We do think there's, another turn or two to go, particularly if high yield credit spreads rise when we look at U.S. equity valuations with respect to a discount rate proxy. But people are looking at that story and saying valuations are still stretched in the U.S. relative to, something like Europe, and saying the earnings growth and the earnings momentum needs to be able to justify that, right?
And that's what the call was in 23 and 24. Yeah, I know we're more expensive relative to Europe, relative to other parts of the world, but the NVIDIAs of the world are earning their way into that.
Correct.
And now is the market telling us, now we've got some uncertainty in the U.S. economy, so maybe that call's not there?
Correct. And that's kind of the fear that we're going to start to see earnings momentum decline. We already have started to see earnings momentum decline in the broad S&P. Right, there's only a few sectors that are kind of holding it up. Financials.
I got to get this in. Damien from a golf course. He says it's early tea time. Sun's coming up. Damien emails in and says, "What's the epsilon look like?" On the back of every equation is a Greek letter. It looks like an E, folks. Like out of the movie, the TV show Rome from years ago. What's the epsilon look right now, and what's it mean for our listeners and our viewers?
Epsilon with respect to the Greek letter for options?
Yeah, for options.
Is that
just the risk that's out there?
That's the leverage,
the
right?
blended risk that's out there.
So I think positioning broadly in options markets, discretionary, systematic, however you kind of look at it, positioning, particularly over the last few weeks, has been very much cleaned out. CTAs per hour model.
That's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Cleaned out. CTAs per hour model have actually turned short U.S. equities. So even in a rally, they're actually still going to be net sellers. When we look at volatility control, systematic strategies, for example, they have delevered quite significantly. And again, on the discretionary side, if discretionary investors are reducing U.S. equity exposure, right, they are cleaning out their position. They are degrossing, de-risking as well. So it's a lot cleaner. It was even a lot cleaner heading relative to August 5th. I keep bringing that up.
What is August 5th?
August 5th was when we got that, VIX to 65 in the pre-market. Ultimately, closed at 37, 38. Yeah.
12 and the VIX is the new one is 20. Max Krenikoff, thank you so much. Derivatives with UBS this morning here on some of the optionality. Can't say enough about the Bloomberg terminal here, folks. For it, I was addicted. I lived on OVDV, which is a big fancy graphic. I'm not going to show it because on radio it doesn't work, but I really can't say enough about it. Shout out to Kent Osmond, who got me into all this a few years ago with this wonderful book, Iceberg Risk. Futures up 16, Dow futures up 50, the VIX 21.50. Across the nation on your commute, good morning on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's Fed Day. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Trade over 10,000 U.S. stocks and ETFs, U.S. equity index options, U.S. treasuries, and more on your timetable. Learn more at ibkr.com/around-the-clock. Well, we've got futures pointing to small moves. This is before the Fed's policy decision later today. Words from Chair Jay Powell. The central bank expected to keep the key rate unchanged. NASDAQ futures up 0.3%. Same for S&P futures. Dow futures up 0.1%. The two-year yield 4.05%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%. That's up 1 basis point. To commodities, COMEX gold, $3,047 an ounce. We go to oil, Brent crude, $70 a barrel. WTI crude, $66 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. Few companies making news. Purdue Pharma, it filed a new Chapter 11 plan, pledging it'll give creditors over $7.4 billion of cash to compensate those victims of the opioid crisis. And Canadian retailer Couche-Tard, Seven & I signed a confidentiality pact. They're paving the way for discussions around antitrust issues in the U.S. And finally, Cathie Wood's ARK Investment sold shares in Meta for the first time in about a year. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Damien Sassower from the golf course. Paul, I got the sunrise here. I mean, it's important.
Yep.
6:59 a.m. was the sunrise in Greenwich, Connecticut. So he's like
Balls
20. He's
in
like
the air
on the
right
third
around
hole.
Yeah, no
He's
problem.
on the third hole
Sure.
already. He emails in, thanks for listening to the golf course, Damien. And, he says epsilon's there, but what he's really focused on is theta. And the Greek letters, folks, they all mean something within derivative dynamics. And theta is the number one thing I focus on from engineering, which is time.
Okay.
It's the time to get. You buy an option, and every second, every day, that option lessens in value is the time drifts away, the theta drifts away. I also look at it from a physics standpoint. And right now, how do you come up with an x-axis on the Fed?
Yeah.
How do you come up with an x-axis? I just don't see it.
I don't know.
Because of the uncertainty.
The uncertainty, I think April 2nd is an important day for the markets with the tariffs and what that means. And maybe we go from there.
Gina Martin-Adams with us with Bloomberg Intelligence. What she does is she trots out the Dow Jones Industrial Average and looks at the x-axis. Gina, how's the x-axis look here? Do you have any idea out 1 month, out 1 year, where we would be, or is there just too much uncertainty?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now. It's very difficult to predict where we go near term, let alone longer term. And we do have to be somewhat nimble to policy changes. I think our economic reality is such that the uncertainty of policy is resulting in some deterioration in the economic outlook, but not enough to create certainty of a monetary policy movement to support economic conditions. And the result of that is just a lot of volatility in the short run here. At the same time, we're coming off of 2 consecutive years of incredibly robust growth and a bit of a reversion to the mean in tech. Tech, of course, drove a significant amount of earnings growth as well as price momentum in the index. Now that tech has passed its peaked earnings momentum, we're starting to see a pretty significant slowdown to reprice prospects for the tech sector as well. So those two things together would imply near-term volatility, probably further downside for certain tech and tech-related industries that still need to mean revert in terms of valuations. And we need to be nimble on the outlook. If we get some trade policy certainty, some tax policy certainty, that can certainly offer a bit of stability to the markets.
So what's changed, Gina, from your perspective in the last couple months? Has it simply been the uncertainty surrounding trade policy, maybe coupled with valuations? Is that it?
Well, that's it, along with the reality sort of striking global equity markets that the U.S. isn't the only game in town in the AI race. I mean, let's not forget that back in January, we got the big DeepSeek announcement that China is now in the AI race.
Yeah.
Confirmation from Alibaba that they are as well. We're starting to see significant rotation also into Europe on account of the fact that estimates revision has been positive. Some of that is related to policy certainty or improving policy prospects from Germany as well as defense spending. So there are a number of factors that are creating volatility and certainly rotation in the global equity markets. But, yeah, I think if you were to point at one specific thing that really did take the markets off guard, it's trade policy this year, in addition to what's happening with tech.
See, you're not seeing this on radio right now. Gina Martin Adams with us from Paris. She's talking with us, but she's on hold with Hermes.
Yes.
To see if she can get a bag interview over on Roof Fabric. Oh, no. Tell us about Paris right now. What's the mood there that you've observed, Gina Martin Adams, with the tumult going on in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I just got into Paris this morning. It's a beautiful day here in Paris. I've been in London the last 2 days, and that's been really interesting and very telling. I think a couple of things come immediately to mind in my interactions with clients. Number one, they're really questioning the durability of the European equity market recovery, which I think is very interesting. The European skepticism is still alive and well with respect to the durability of recovery. There's a lot of attention being paid to German policymakers and obviously the potential for defense spending. Number two, there's an increasing acceptance in the idea that we really need to question valuations for tech, that we really do need to right-size our expectations in the tech sector. And number three, there's increasing adoption of the China trade, which is very different than where we were in December. There's more interest in China. There's a little bit more interest in the idea that the Chinese equity market improvements that were first sparked by policy changes could really endure over the course of the year. And that's just my takeaways from London. Stay tuned for more from Paris.
Gina, if I know you're on hold with their meds. If you get through to an appointment on Roof Fabric saying on air, if you get an appointment, are you going for the Kelly bag or the Birkin bag?
I have to say, Tom, it's not really my speed. I'm not in that income category, unfortunately. So I'm just going to see a lot of clients and talk about equity markets for the next couple of days.
Buy some NVIDIA options. That'll pay for it. Hey, Gina Martin Adams, thanks so much. She's long NVIDIA. I'm kidding, folks. We don't do that. But it's great that, what a trooper to be with us from Paris. And it's a great office. It's right by the Opera House there, if you know where that is, folks. Futures up 17. Dow Futures up 59. Quickly, our news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he'll speak with President Trump today to get details on his call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick reports the details so far have been a bit contradictory.
Trump's envoy had described this sort of baby step towards a ceasefire as applying to energy infrastructure and infrastructure more broadly. But the summary released by the Russians said that they had agreed to stop attacking Ukrainian energy infrastructure specifically.
Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick. President Zelensky says Russia fired about 150 drones overnight and hit Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Turkish police have arrested Istanbul's mayor, a key rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as part of an investigation into alleged corruption and terror links. Unredacted documents related to the 1963 assassination of President John F. Kennedy have been released following an order by President Trump shortly after he took office. The documents were posted on the website of the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration last night. University of Virginia Center for Politics Director Larry Sabato says it will take a long time to go through the new material.
There are going to be surprises in there, but I just don't think there are going to be that many surprises about JFK's assassination.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Okay, Paul, we got to talk about, if it matters, live gate. The Rangers last night had 13 shots on goal. Folks, in a normal hockey game, you're popping 30 shots on goal. They were terrible. Now, the seats I sit in, they're pretty much rock star seats. It's like where the players come out. And I'm like 8 rows back, and you're right there with.
Well, you're a rock star, so that's why
it's like Paul, being second row at the Knicks. Does the gate matter if you are that bad, and you sell fewer tickets at Madison Square Garden? Does it matter in economics, or does it just not?
They
matter
sell
anymore?
out every game. They sell out every game. It's just the greatest. Whether they're good or bad, the Ranger fans are passionate. Hockey fans are passionate. They're small in number, which is why nobody talks about a hockey boomer, but. They're passionate, and they show up every game. They sell out 18,500 seats a night.
I mean, the Sweeney tickets are $2,438 per ticket to see 13 shots on goal.
Exactly, right.
I'm just dazzled by it.
Not a good night for the Rangers.
But the whole thing, I mean.
They need what they need in the model for the people at Madison Square Garden is playoff games. They need playoff games.
That's where you
that
make,
makes or breaks. That makes
or breaks.
Yep. So same for the Knicks.
Same with baseball.
Yep. So, but it's really important. When you don't have, when you have fewer games, you have to have the playoff game.
Is there a regional NCAA that's like has empty seats? Is there one that doesn't draw like
huge.
the others?
And they all do in their early rounds.
In the early rounds, there's empty seats.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, great. Anyway, I had to get that in on the Rangers. That's just appalling ice hockey. Futures up 17. It's Fed Day.
Now a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo.
It is the newspapers, and they've really been something. We'd like to do some lighthearted stuff here, folks, but I'll tell you, just newspaper to newspaper right now, absolutely unreal, the jumble that's out there. With an unreal report today. Lisa Mateo, what do you have?
Well, we always hear different stories, right, about President Trump's hostility toward Canada, how that's affecting different things. Now it's actually could be hurting New York City tourism. So this was in the New York Times. They say more than 1 million Canadians visit New York City last year. They spent about $600 million. Only the British visit more than Canadians to New York City. I didn't realize that. So now a lot of them are canceling their trips since he imposed the tariffs on Canada, threatened to make it the 51st state. So the data shows last month the number of Canadians flying to 3 airports in and around the city fell 11% compared with 2024, that same time period. And the New York Times, they spoke with different tourism guides. They said school groups, they're calling off those end of the year trips.
That's the sad part.
Retirees, newlyweds, friends, families. And they say the tourism boycott could extend because now people are planning 2026 trips. So they might be canceling those as well.
I want Paul to talk here because I'm afraid of what I'll say.
No, it's just it's sad. And again, you think about Florida, and I think I know a lot of Canadians go to the Phoenix area in the wintertime for all that kind of stuff. So it's not good.
I would say more than anything here, I'll just opine, it's this talk about a 51st state. Mm-hmm. I grew up in basically southern Toronto, which was called Rochester. And across Lake Ontario, I think the airplane flight is 18 minutes or something. Right. And it's this talk of a 51st state is just
it hurts.
Painful.
Yeah.
Next, you got something lighter than that, please.
Dude, how about this? More companies leaving Delaware for Nevada, okay? Yeah. And it's called Dexit. That's what they're calling it. So Delaware's new governor, he's just warning. He's saying they're rolling the dice by leaving to Vegas. But the reason why they're doing it, they say Nevada offers a much safer bet than Delaware. And it's recently become easier to move because Delaware's Supreme Court changed recently. They cleared companies to leave the state. So they agreed with Nevada's argument because Nevada says it should be the companies and not the courts that should conduct those cost-benefit analysis over what state offers that better deal. So they've had a few more. You had Bill Ackman's Pershing Square, Dropbox, the Trade Desk. They've gone from Delaware over to Nevada.
Interesting. Well, it's a huge franchise they've got down in Wilmington.
Yep.
Say the least. Next, what do you got?
Okay, so the next time any of you please go to the Taco Bell drive-thru, okay, especially those late night runs, AI could be taking your next order. We have Yum Brands. They own Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, KFC. They're partnering with NVIDIA to build these AI-driven services in the restaurants. So Some of them are AI-powered voice ordering at the drive-thru. So now AI, you won't be talking to a person, you'll be talking to, I guess, a computer, and it's going to be used in about 500 locations. But they're saying it's going to help boost sales doing that instead of going with the regular humans. But they're saying that the humans are not going to disappear. They're still going to be there. They're just going to be focused more on customer service and helping the customers.
All right.
Instead.
All right.
But they're using it in different ways, internal things too. But McDonald's too has been, talking about the different technology that
Number
they're
two
using.
with a Coke. How hard is that? I've been ordering that since I was 15.
Well,
what percentage of their business is like seamless DoorDash, Grubhub?
That's
It's
a
gotta
good
be
question. Yeah.
ginormous.
I know
Have
in
you
my
seen
house
the
it's
number?
ginormous. But
Not in my house.
I picked up the bag of McDonald's. I said, why are we ordering McDonald's? Who are we?
I know.
What have we become?
Well, it's different when you walk in. Truth be told, I went to a McDonald's last week, and you go in there, and it's just a computer screen. You can't go up to the person anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I
so
hate
you're
it.
sitting there,
I hate
and I'm confused. I'm sitting there pressing like 50 million buttons. I'm like, what? I could have just gone to the person, told them what I wanted,
Number
and
two
be
with a
done
Coke.
like this.
They made it so easy back then.
I was so
All
confused.
right. Figure it out.
But technology, things are changing.
Lisa Mateo, the newspapers this morning. Thank you, Lisa Mateo, for that. Futures up 17 here on Fed Day. Just a churn to the market, waiting for the new headlines. And of course, at 1:30, we'll have the Fed decides. Malcolm Byrne created a jewel. He did it in New Orleans with Chris Whitley. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What's the immediate take of a tariff war?
For the longest time, technology has been the driver of this market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Trump declared a national emergency at the U.S. border with Mexico.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. It is Bloomberg Surveillance. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Good morning to all of you on a Fed day. The Fed decides. We'll do that at 1:30 here. The futures up 17, I should say. The VIX 21.15. And it's too much. We're going from Max Grenikoff to Dean Curnutt.
I know.
It's way too many Greek letters this morning.
That's going to be some derivatives galore here today. Looking at the bond market here, pretty steady here today and ahead of the Fed, Tom. We got the 10-year Treasury yield, sitting right around 4.29%. So we'll call it right there.
Watching the 10-year real yield, 1.99%. Really not much of a story. The real story has been economic growth, and we'll have some great conversations. Seth Carpenter of Morgan Stanley will join us with an important update on the Morgan Stanley view on economic growth as we dive into the Fed meeting. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, we're brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and their technology. We thank Commonwealth this morning for all that they do. Right to it from the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we've got some small movement futures on this Fed day. Our coverage, don't forget, begins at 1:30 p.m. Wall Street time. Be sure to be here. NASDAQ futures up 0.3% right now. Dow futures little change. S&P futures up 0.2%. The 2-year yield 4.05%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that is little change. The Turkish Lira, the main mover in currency markets, plunged more than 10% after authorities detained President Erdogan's political rival. Right now, it's down about 3.5% at 38.33 against the dollar. We go to the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, up about 0.2%. Over to commodities, we have gold extending a record high. COMEX gold at $3,047 an ounce. Brent crude, $70 a barrel. WTI crude, $66 a barrel. And banking news, Morgan Stanley planning to cut about 2,000 employees later this month to keep a lid on costs. And sources are saying its financial advisors will not be affected by that. And then you have Citigroup slash bonuses tied to the bank's turnaround for hundreds of top executives. And then Bloomberg Business Week saying TD Bank's expansion south of the border, well, it made it a favorite among money launderers. It led to $3.1 billion in fines, the first ever guilty plea by a U.S. bank for money laundering conspiracy. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Yeah, I saw their exit from New England. Boston Globe wrote that up yesterday, I believe. A whole bunch of TD branches exiting in some way out of New England. We say good morning, particularly out on YouTube. Paul, I've been remiss. It's 8:03 Wall Street time, and I've completely blown it. Gold, a record high.
I know.
Moments
it's
ago.
Amazing. I mean, we're at $3,047 an ounce. Our next guest joins us here, Dean Curnutt, CEO and founder of Macro Risk Advisors. What's going on with gold? I mean, I get it, safe haven kind of thing, but is something else going on here?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, first, sort of stepping back and thinking about this idea of diversification. And, it's a time-honored pursuit in markets, and it's elusive. And what I mean by that is you can try to pick stocks that zig and zag with one another, but it turns out that when there is a risk off, that's when correlations, really rise. So you have got to find assets that are just unlike equities. And what I would say is gold is truly unlike stocks. If I look at the last 20-odd years of both returns and correlations in the S&P and gold, the realized correlation of daily returns is 5%. That is absurdly low, and you just can't find something like that in the equity market. If you just chose even two random stocks, you're going to get correlations in the 40 to 70%. So gold, first and foremost, is a diversifier. And second, it's a limited supply asset. And I think that's critical as well. An asset that does not have limited supply is treasuries, right? We're awash in treasuries. And I think right now you want to find those assets that are disciplined. And gold is a disciplined asset in that there's just not a supplier of it.
I want to come back to gold, but Dean, this is too important a question. Is persistent free cash flow a scarce item right now?
I think in some ways, yes, I would say that as well. The market, of course, has been pricing this gigantic CapEx spend. Growth in CapEx has obviously been a big part of what's empowered the Mag 7. Compare the sort of top of the S&P, the Mag 7, to where we were 25 years ago. And just to use this word discipline again, profitability in these companies currently is much higher than it was back then. The PE ratios, while they're high, are much more modest than the Cisco and the Intel, the PE boom that was the 2000s. So free cash flow is an important aspect of markets. But I think, right now we're in this period where the market's taken a good look at future earnings and also, re-rating the PE.
The water's coming out. Who's wearing no clothes as the tide pulls out right now? Where's the exposure that could be embarrassing in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I think that it's
the Europe play.
No, I don't necessarily think that that's as big an issue. I mean, I think if anything, folks are excited about the big change in debt trajectory, at least potentially in Germany. We'll see how that plays out. I think the question around valuations is always going to be an important one. And at some point, this U.S. exceptionalism theme got to be, I believe, reasonably overdone. When a market outperforms to the extent that the U.S. has, any allocation to foreign stocks, for example, has proven to be, taking away from your return. And I think people just crowd into a winner. And I think that's where the risk is.
Let's talk, Paul, the arcane language of Dean Curnutt.
Uh-oh.
Vol on Bitcoin and assets related to it, MSTR miners, is getting hit hard. 1 month implied on IBIT is just 47. and that's what's in English. The rest of it's in Greek. I mean, this pro-derivative stuff, folks, is it's sort of like in the third season of Game of Thrones. It's it's just a little arcane to say the least.
It's off the rails a little bit. Dean, what are your clients doing in terms of this year in 2025? We've had a higher degree of economic policy uncertainty, which has impacted financial markets pretty significantly. What are your clients doing in the derivatives market to try to, I guess, play that, if you will?
Yeah, I think our major call and our conversations with clients have focused on this idea that the stock market was diversifying itself in a way that was unsustainable. What do I mean by that? So if we just look at the Mag 7 and we look at the way in which its movements are relative to the rest of the market, zigging and zagging, a lot of diversification, even within the Mag 7, unsustainable levels of diversification. And what that did was it reduced the overall level of volatility at the index level for the S&P. And so as the Trump administration came in, and of course there was a lot of enthusiasm for a pro-growth agenda, I think that the stop-start of the tariffs has been very, very difficult for folks to handicap. And so, earlier this year, we really pushed people to say, okay, look, let's buy some insurance. And, insurance is something you have to pay for. It's not free. Nothing like that is free. But there was an opportunity to do relatively basic trades in the S&P that allowed you to defray your risk for what we thought was a really reasonable cost. That's worked quite well.
On your morning commute across the nation, good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, Bloomberg 1130 in New York, 92.9 FM in Boston, and all the digital process that we have. Good morning, Sirius XM. On YouTube as well, Dean Curnutt, Macro Risk Advisors. What do the cross moments tell you? You're right about skew. Folks, here's the Greek. 1 month, 25-day call vol is up 3 from a week ago, and 25-day put vol is up 4.4. Translate the cross moments, particularly skew, right now.
Well, let's just step back and look at this 10% drawdown that we had. In the S&P, there's only a handful that you can find over the last 25 years. Some of them are the doozies of the GFC, COVID. You have the VIX event in 2018. This one has been unique in the combination of the speed of it, which has happened over just 20 odd days, but a relatively low level of realized volatility, 20% realized volatility. And it's really the absence of very large moves. So if I look at my subset of 10% drawdowns, I always see at least 2-3% down days in the S&P. My biggest move on this drawdown is just 2.7%. So it's the sequencing of down 1%, down 1.5% that has led to, pretty good destruction of wealth at the S&P level. That, of course, has lifted the VIX, but it's been a controlled demolition, as one client put it. And I think I think that's well said. So the cross moments, I don't think are flaring in a big way. It's not like we had a VIX of 10 that went to 30. We had a VIX of 14 or 15 that climbed its way into the low 20s level. So it's, like I said, very controlled. And I think the handoff here is, okay, the pods for the big multi-strat hedge funds have had to de-risk. That's caused a lot of factor volatility, a lot of rotation. But the big handoff now is, what is the impact on the real economy? I took real interest in the piece on the Bloomberg terminal yesterday, quoting Morgan Stanley's president saying deal making has really gotten frozen here.
Yep.
Right. So it does feel like corporate America has been stymied by the start-stop of the tariff negotiations.
Again, we've had this drawdown in the S&P roughly 8% here. The peak to trough was roughly 10%. If I want to buy downside protection here, how much more expensive is it today versus a couple of months ago?
Yeah, certainly. They say you can't trade the VIX, and that's true. The VIX is a calculation agent. It sort of dutifully takes in all option prices of the S&P and pops out a number. But really what it represents is the cost of insurance. And so when you move the VIX from 15 to 20, you're popping the cost of insurance up by kind of 30%, 1 month insurance. I like using what they call put spreads, which is what I would call a modified insurance policy. If the market truly crashes, that put spread is going to get me some insurance back. I'm going to get paid back to some extent, but not GFC style insurance, right, where I would have needed a gigantic amount of insurance. So we like using put spreads here because, the VIX is at 20. It's not as if it's a steal, but I do think, continuing to maintain some insurance is important.
So translate the pro put spread structure over to someone like Lisa Mateo with a 501k. She's killed it on the tech play. She's not going to do a put spread on a 501k. How do you be defensive within a retirement program?
Right. And this is where I come back to, insurance is costly. We don't ask Geico to sell us car insurance and not expect them to make money. You shouldn't expect Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley to sell you financial market insurance and not to make money. Insurance is costly. Over time, that cost can add up. And so where our focus at Macro Risk Advisors has been on diversifying assets like gold. And gold is acting really nicely defensively, even as it trends higher. So it's not a tail risk hedge that you can truly count on. There is some basis risk, but because it's got this limited supply profile, and this is the most important part, it occupies a space in the sort of collective intelligence of how people think about markets, that it benefits from chaos. And, sadly, I think the world is having to confront a lot of uncertainty here. And so as we try to price in the what ifs of Russia, Ukraine, of tariffs, of monetary policy, that's a lot to take in. And gold benefits from this sort of widening of, what we have to handicap in terms of potential outcomes.
Clients you talk to, do they think there's another leg down in this market?
Yeah, I'd say it's very easy to paint pictures of, further downside. I think it comes, back to how much is the real economy truly affected by the tariff uncertainty.
I got to get this in. I mean, there's cruel and unusual punishment. You actually bring your children in to see Bloomberg surveillance. Can we say good morning to Mr. Thompson? Really appreciate his attention to the show. My young kids even watch you on YouTube while they eat breakfast before school.
Okay.
I went back and said, well, what do they eat? I figured it was like Fruit Loops or, and it's like a Lisa Mateo breakfast. They're having like gluten-free this and, the oatmeal and, come on. So we
Captain
say
Crunch.
to Mr. Thompson, this is cruel and unusual punishment as well. You didn't bring your offspring in today, did you?
She could not make the 5:30 wake-up call. So
either could I, but that's a separate story. Dean Curnutt, thank you so much with Macro Risk. Can't say enough about his research note. You've got to get that through Macro Risk Advisors. It's a really brilliant, sophisticated note. Speaking of sophisticated, with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says President Vladimir Putin's vow not to attack energy infrastructure was very much at odds with reality following an overnight barrage of drone strikes. Russia's strikes hit civilian areas and damaged a hospital in Ukraine following the refusal by Putin to back a full 30-day ceasefire during discussions with his American counterpart, Donald Trump. Zelensky, through an interpreter, said he would speak to Trump later today.
Today
I will have contact with President Trump. We will be talking to him about the details of the next steps. We've had very good meeting in Jeddah with our teams, and I think everything has been going well, except for Russia, which is always unhappy when something is going in the right direction. We will discuss the details about the next steps, and I think I will hear from him the details of his conversation with Putin.
Meanwhile, the White House has described the call between President Donald Trump and Putin as the first step in a movement to peace. Israel has launched airstrikes across the Gaza Strip that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says are only the beginning and a necessary condition for freeing hostages. Former Defense Department official Mick Mulroy.
It is meant to send a message to Hamas that this is only going to intensify and get worse for them if they do not at least allow the first phase to be extended.
According to the Hamas-run health ministry, more than 400 people have been killed. A federal judge has blocked enforcement of President Trump's executive order banning transgender people from serving in the U.S. military. Judge Anna Reyes in Washington, D.C., ruled that Trump's order to exclude transgender troops from military service likely violates their constitutional rights. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Appreciate it. This morning, Paul, did we do enough Greek letters today?
Oh, that was plenty. I mean,
it's like,
But what I'm learning, you talk to Dean Curnutt. I mean, his clients, they still think there's potentially risk in the marketplace. They're buying the downside protection in the futures and options markets, and that's kind of what you got to do.
I will say, folks, that part of the problem, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone, and this goes back to Paul Wilmot of Imperial College. We are so honored at Bloomberg to have Bruno DePierre with us, who came up with an idea called Ito's Dilemma. I'm not going to go into it, but he's like, when he walks in, it's like, Judge walking in.
Right.
Aaron Judge. I mean, Bruno's a giant in derivative finance. But what I will say is what the pros are doing is they're saying, okay, I need some insurance here. I'm afraid of my equity portfolio. And they will buy downside protection, and they have to pay something for that.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. They have to pay a fee. And then all the industry is one strategy. How can I get same downside protection but lower the fee?
Right.
And the Bloomberg was invented not for that. The Bloomberg was invented for yield, duration, convexity. But all of a sudden one day for Tom Secunda and the team, this derivative math showed up.
Yep.
And it was, I'll tell you folks, I was sitting there in the real world, not here. And it was like, are you kidding me? I can do the derivative tools of giants like Nassim Taleb or Bruno DePierre and others on the Bloomberg. And it was stunning to see that happen. A guy named David Tamborelli's the one that really brought that.
Some of the smartest folks we have here, I mean, obviously all the engineers and computer scientists
the programmers
are crazy smart, but
they're all work from home. They're working from home like 8 days a week.
But the core product people in Bloomberg, those are the folks that interact with our clients every day. And when they see the market moving, like to futures and options 20, 30 years ago, our core product people are right there with our clients, our users, saying, what do you guys need? And then they come back to Bloomberg and they say, we need to build this for our clients.
Then they build it, and it's wrapped around, when you hear me say, like, talk about jargon, cross moments. The cross moment is whether Lisa's run out of yogurt in the the refrigerator. Right now, somebody just emailed me from home. I need to do a grocery list. We're out of this, we're out of that. Those are our cross moments. They're skew. Ready? Kurtosis.
Uh-oh.
It's not a fungus, folks. It's like part of the estimation of risk and probability. There's a thing called variance, which is almost in English. But the cross moments are, this is big stuff. We like to get these heavyweights in here and give you an adult conversation on it. Hopefully we can translate it back a little bit. Dean Curnutt there on gold. That was fascinating.
Yeah.
Is a diversifier.
Yeah, absolutely. And the lack of correlation there is interesting.
3,045?
Yeah, how about that?
Nixon was $35 an ounce.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a long ways away. From New York, Bloomberg's surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. All right, we've got futures, well, a little in the green right now. Following another day of losses on Wall Street, mega cap tech stocks led the markets lower. NVIDIA, a big part of that, after the stock closed down more than 3% yesterday this morning. Shares on the rebound, up about 1%. Now we go to NASDAQ futures, up 0.2%. S&P futures up 0.1%. Dow futures are little changed. The 2-year yield, 4.05%, up 1 basis point. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.28%. And that is little change. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. So what we're going to do here, Steve Witkoff's scheduled to be with Bloomberg here in a bit. We're going to try to squeeze in Seth Carpenter, Chief Economist at Morgan Stanley. And I mean, Seth, you open up Barron's this weekend, and it's not a full-page spread and photograph of Seth Carpenter. It's a full-page photograph of Ellen Zentner. Tell us what Ellen Zentner does for you at Morgan Stanley.
Yeah, no, it's great. She was obviously here in research with us in the investment bank. She's now in wealth management. She's the chief economic strategist for wealth management. So she's taking just the incredible human capital she has, thinking about macroeconomics, thinking about macro markets, and translating it into thematic trading ideas to help our wealth management clients.
When she's in the investment world, or you're over modeling out, do you or Ellen or your entire team, do you have any clue of where nominal GDP is now, the partial differentials of real growth and inflation dynamics? I'm not there, Dr. Carpenter.
No, I think all of those issues are interesting, and it's fun to sort of get into the technical jargon and all of the details. I always, though, try to pull it back with clients to sort of say, where are we now and what have we learned recently and where are things going? So we came into the year with a strong economy. The news since then, though, has pushed us to think the moderate slowing that we were expecting is probably going to be even stronger. And we've had lots of news in terms of policy. I think tariffs are clear. We've been saying people underappreciate the hit to growth from tariffs. I think the restrictions on immigration is probably the single biggest policy relative to its macro impact that people don't factor in enough. And then, the real new news so far this year coming out of Washington has been DOGE and what they've been doing in terms of laying off federal workers, interrupting, suspending, canceling, I don't know what the right verb is, a bunch of federal payments. I think all of that says what we had thought was going to be roughly neutral fiscal policy for 2025 as the Congress did reconciliation, as they look forward to making those tax cuts permanent. But 2025 would have been the sort of eye of the storm, for example. Now, instead of roughly neutral, it's looking like negative fiscal impulse as the government's getting shrunk. And so I think that's how I've been explaining it in much simpler terms, hopefully.
Seth, are your clients, what's their degree of, I guess, uncertainty? That's the term we've heard in a lot of conference calls and a lot of company presentations. A lot of executives just aren't sure the environment in which they're operating. Are you hearing that from your clients as well?
Absolutely. Coming into the year, clients would ask, Seth, what's your favorite trade? And I would say, I'm just a dumb economist. I'm not allowed to make trade recommendations. But if you could buy stock in companies that make erasers, that's probably a good idea, because I know we and everybody else is going to have to change their forecasts a lot of times this year as the incoming information comes in. No, seriously, I do think that's a real question, the uncertainty. Tariffs are a great example. I think you could have seen headlines for our co-president, Dan Simkowitz, yesterday talking about maybe a pause in some of the M&A activity as businesses assess what's going on. Investing clients are trying to figure out, for example, April 2nd with this so-called reciprocal tariff announcement. Is it going to be literally reciprocal tariffs? How much are they going to lean into tariffs because of non-tariff barriers? Is it going to be all the countries in the world that have a trade deficit with the U.S.
Right.
or just the ones with biggest? I think all of those questions are firmly on the table.
Dr. Carpenter, we got to go to the White House, but I want to slip this in. Seriously, could you generate a dot this morning for the Fed on the dot plot?
So are you asking how many cuts I think will be in the median?
No, I'm asking you if you could professionally generate a dot and a sequence of dots on the dot plot, given the uncertainty that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, that is the hard part. So I was there right at the Fed. I was one of the staff working with them to develop the dot plot in 2011, 2012 when it first came out. They're going to do it. They're going to write things down, but they know, the FOMC knows internally, this is their best guess, but in times of uncertainty, the modal forecast is by no means anything that you want to hang your hat on. Okay. So yet I could write something down. Yes, they will write things down, but boy, they will be ready to tear those up on a moment's notice.
Too short a visit. Seth Carpenter, thank you so much with Morgan Stanley this morning. Our John Farrow in conversation with Mr. Witkoff of the White House.
Call was epic, Jonathan. I thought it was epic, transformational. Those are the sorts of adjectives that I use about this call. The president and President Trump and President Putin were in sync with one another. The call was outcome-oriented. They were talking about how to save lives, how to stop the carnage, and for me, I was proud to be an American sitting there listening to it.
Steve, let's talk about some of the outcomes. We're hopeful that ultimately we end up with a 30-day ceasefire. Before we get there, we're working towards things like a prisoner swap. We're working towards a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. That's important too. There was also a conversation yesterday about maybe an agreement to limit attacks on energy infrastructure. And we'd love to build on that, because earlier on this morning we heard from the Ukrainian leader who said that overnight Russia sent 150 drones and hit Ukrainian energy. I just wonder what was actually agreed and whether Russia crossed the line overnight.
Well, what was agreed between the two presidents was, and it was at President Trump's suggestion, that there be a cessation of attacks on energy infrastructure from both sides, and civilian infrastructure for that matter. Also, working towards a Black Sea moratorium on hits on naval vessels and freighters carrying grain and things of that sort, and ultimately that would evolve into a full-on ceasefire, which is a bit more complicated because there's a 2,000-kilometer border, there's Kursk, and there's a lot of details that go into that. But with regard to your question on some of the reporting with regard to the Russian drones last night, I have it on good information from a telephone call I had before I went on this show that President Putin issued an order within 10 minutes of his call with the president, directing Russian forces not to be attacking any Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And any attacks that happened last night would have happened before that order was given. In fact, the Russians tell me this morning that 7 of their drones were on their way when President Putin issued his order, and they were shot down by Russian forces. So I tend to believe that President Putin is operating in good faith. He said that he was going to be operating in good faith to the president yesterday, and I take him at his word.
So, Mr. Witkoff, is your understanding that as of today, energy facilities, energy infrastructure will be off limits?
That's my understanding, yes, ma'am.
Do you think the next stage potentially, as we get the roadmap towards a 30-day full ceasefire, potentially geography should be off limits, like drones hitting Kyiv?
You know, I can't speak to that. I think the idea behind a 30-day ceasefire, first of all, we made more progress yesterday than has been made in the last 3.5 years. The two leaders actually talked and committed to cessation of attacks on energy infrastructure and civilian infrastructure. They talked about reviving the Black Sea maritime agreement that had been negotiated several years ago and never really implemented. Those are monumental things, and they're trust-building things as well. And I think beyond that, they also went into how you would put the finishing touches on a full-on ceasefire. That full-on ceasefire has a lot to do with this 2,000-kilometer line that where the Ukrainians are lined up against the Russians. It's complicated. There are different battlefield conditions in various spots. That's for the technical teams to figure it out. And they're going to be meeting in Saudi Arabia, I believe, beginning Monday and Tuesday. So lots of progress happened yesterday, and it happened in large part because of President Trump.
Let's talk about that meeting in Saudi Arabia in the next week or so. The team's going to be led by, I believe, Secretary Rubio. I think we all want to know what needs to happen at that meeting before the two leaders end up in the same room to get to that end deal that we all want to see. What needs to happen in the next week?
Well, I'm not sure that the Secretary of State has done an amazing job, as has the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. They were both at the last meeting in Jeddah. It went well. Lots of trust building happened. And I believe on Monday we actually have the technical teams going. And why? Because that's what we're down to. We don't need to have the larger overarching discussions. That's been had, and it was completed yesterday between the two leaders. They agreed on a pathway to some ceasefire conditions today and to a full-on ceasefire that will be negotiated over the coming days. I actually think in a couple of weeks we're going to get to it. So lots of good things. Now it's for the technical teams to dot the I's and cross the T's, and everybody is committed to that process.
If you think we're going to get there in a couple of weeks, could we then see a meeting in person between President Trump and President Putin in the kingdom?
You know, I can't speak for them, but my best bet would be that it's likely to happen. They have a great rapport together. They had a great rapport in the first Trump administration. It was on display yesterday. This was really a very positive, very proactive, outcome-oriented call, and that's who President Trump is. He's there to get to the goal line, and we went a long way yesterday to doing that.
You've known the president a long, long time, going back decades. In fact, there's very few people that know him better than you do. There's a lot of people speculating about what the motives are, what the end objectives are. If we could just sit on that for a moment. Does the push for peace in Ukraine run parallel with a push to normalize US-Russia relations? Or, Steve, are they separate issues?
No, I don't think there's any doubt that the two are important. Russia is a critical relationship for us. It's critical as it affects all other things out there. China, Iran, the Middle East. These two leaders coming together and having conversations about nuclear proliferation, which they did yesterday and was enormously positive. This is enormously beneficial for the world at large. And the president believes in this. He believes in peace. He believes in engaging. He believes in using peace through strength to create a better world for everybody. And with that could come a drop in defense budgets. Take all that money and spend it on things that matter more than waging war all the time. This is his policy. And so he's to be commended for that. Yesterday was literally transformational as far as I am concerned.
Mr. Witkoff, so then is the idea of its normalization to draw a wedge between Russia and China and Russia and Iran as well, to further isolate America's adversaries like Tehran and Beijing?
I think normalization is about having real conversation. President Biden, according to President Putin, did not speak to President Putin for 3.5 years. That's not a proper way to run policy. President Trump, in a short 8 weeks, has spoken to President Putin twice. Very, very positive and constructive conversations. He's directed me on his behalf to go to Moscow. I've had close to 8 hours of conversations with President Putin and met with other key people on his team. And he's directed the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of State, the CIA Director, Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense. Everybody is engaged in this process. And it's really wonderful to see. I think the people ought to be uplifted, and I think you're going to see some very, very positive results in the near term.
In the lengthy conversations you have had with the Russian leader, did restrictions on Russian energy come up at all? Did they come up yesterday?
When you say restrictions, Jonathan, on Russian energy, what do you? I'm not sure what you're asking.
Restrictions on financial services, engaging in deals that restrict the flow of Russian energy, the price cap that the Biden administration pushed over the last year or so, sir. A variety of restrictions that make it difficult for Russian energy to compete with energy elsewhere.
We did not discuss, or pardon me, the president did not discuss specifically sanctions yesterday, if that's what you're referring to. I think obviously that's a conversation that the two leaders are going to have, and everybody's open to it. But first and foremost, we want a solution that means an end to the fighting. We want to get to the ceasefire. That's the president's policy, and we're going to get to the ceasefire. And I think after that, everything else will be a detail. Sanction relief, and all the other things that go with a full-on peace treaty.
Trump said last night to Fox News that Russia would like to use some of the U.S. economic power. This is an individual who's been against the likes of Nord Stream 2 for years, Mr. Witkoff. You know that. But could you see a world when Russian energy comes back online via pipelines like Nord Stream?
Well, I can certainly see that world, but let me give you an example about the deleterious effects here and why we have to get to a solution. Russian oil today is being sold cheap to China. I'm not sure that's such a wonderful benefit of
India.
Okay, you're underscoring my point. So there are all these deleterious things that could come from this, and I think the beginning of it is a conversation. I think it's sort of unacceptable for two world leaders of the stature of a Russian president and an American president who haven't talked in 3.5 years. That's an unacceptable policy program for the president. He wants to get things done, and you get things done by getting on a telephone or meeting personally and instructing your staffs to do that, which is what he's done here.
Mr. Witkoff, it's a conversation we've had a lot on this program, which is the fact that sanctions, when it comes to Russia, didn't change Putin's motives, and they still were able to fund the war by selling a lot of this energy. It just created new markets for Russia to be willing to trade. Scott Bessent, though, the Treasury Secretary, said the other day that we will go to a 10 and bring sanctions if we have to on Russia to bring Putin to the table. Do you see President Trump getting to that point, lifting sanctions to a 10 in order to cajole Putin to the table for this ceasefire?
Look, Scott Bessent is a great Treasury Secretary. I'm not going to speak to what he had to say. I'm going to say this. I've had 2 meetings at the direction of President Trump with President Putin in the last several weeks that have collectively aggregated to almost 8 hours. Many other people, senior people in the administration, are having meetings with their colleagues and their counterparts there. The president has directed all of this. There is amazing progress being made. Yesterday, in one telephone call, we talked about an immediate ceasefire on energy infrastructure. That's game-changing. And also the Black Sea moratorium, game-changing. And the contours of how we get to a personal ceasefire, a 30-day ceasefire, game-changing. Enormous progress as compared to where we were, because we're communicating, we're talking in a collegial, constructive manner, and everybody is outcome-oriented, the outcome being the end of fighting there and the end of the killing there.
We'd all like to see that, sir. If we could just finish on Europe, something we've not discussed in the last 10 minutes or so. The Europeans, Germany and the EU are pushing to rearm. They're set to spend hundreds of billions of euros on defence. That's something that President Trump has been pushing for quite a while. Does he welcome that? Does it complicate talks in any way? Does it antagonise Russia and make this harder? How does he view that at the moment?
Look, I think the president has a policy which is that Europe should pay more for their own defense. And so I think to the extent that that's what's happening, I think that's a good thing. Rearming and all the other stuff that leads to more conflagration, that leads to that undermines a peace process, I would say that that's not such a good thing. So look, we're here to get a deal in Russia and Ukraine, and we're well on the way to getting it done. And I think you're going to hear some really positive things happening as these talks continue.
Mr. Witkoff, you're a successful businessman that is now really at the height of diplomacy around the world. Europeans' strong economic ties with Russia did not prevent Putin for his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2021. Do you think it could prevent hostilities in the future if we were to see a ceasefire and businesses and trade were back to come into the fore?
I don't think there's any doubt. I think the point is to get everybody focused not on war, but on making their countries better, on spending the money on their people. In Ukraine, on rebuilding, on doing good things for their people. That's how you get to a better place, and that's President Trump's agenda throughout the world. And we see it being his agenda is very effective. People buy into it. I was on the phone with President Macron last night, giving him a download of what happened. And we had a really positive conversation about the outcome. So I think there's a lot of buy-in to President Trump's leadership, the way he's leading the world today, not just the United States. It's just exceptional for me to watch.
We've only got a few seconds left with you, sir, but I think that's an important comment to make. Relations with Europe, they are endorsing, are they, this approach that the president is taking? Because publicly they seem to be saying one thing. Are they endorsing this approach privately?
I'm hearing a lot of endorsement, Jonathan.
That's a very interesting development, sir. I wanted to finish on you personally, just for a moment if we can. For the people internationally that aren't aware, sir, you were widely regarded as a talented negotiator, making a fortune in real estate before taking on these responsibilities. And you seem to be having an instant impact in the role. And it started in January before Trump even got into the White House with the agreement, the ceasefire and hostage exchange between Israel and Hamas in January. Can we just finish on how transferable those skills actually are? How different is this for you to go from that world of real estate to this, life and death in Ukraine?
Well, you know, I went into the real estate business. I was a young lawyer, and I went in because I wanted to be Donald Trump, to tell you the truth. And that really is the truth, by the way. I've talked about this in the past. He was a great real estate guy, and to a large extent, I follow his example when it comes to negotiating. The president is all about clearing up misconceptions, clearing up miscommunication, figuring out how to get a good deal for all stakeholders, all constituents as a part of the deal, and then deciding beforehand what the outcome he wants is. That's how deals get structured, and they're not all that dissimilar in the political realm. And that's how we've done it in the Middle East. We follow his direction in that way, and it's highly effective.
Steve, you've been generous with your time this morning, sir, and we appreciate it here on Bloomberg Surveillance. We've got to do this again. Thank you very much for being with us.
John Farrow with Steve Witkoff, a generous conversation there about the moment at hand between the United States and Russia and Ukraine as well. The headlines are moving in real time. There was some extraordinary comments there from Mr. Witkoff about getting off the phone and involving the drone attacks, of course, both ways of Russia to Ukraine and Ukraine to Russia. I'm not going to comment on those because I don't have the verbatim in front of me, but we make note of that, and of course, a lot of other discussions as well, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we heard from Mr. Witkoff, a full-on ceasefire. You know, it's more complicated. A lot of details that go into that is what he was saying is so. But again, as Mr. Witkoff was suggesting here, a very good call from their perspective in terms of they are in discussions, they're speaking to each other, and that is the first step in what could be a bigger process.
I'll give anybody, you know, you read Henry Kissinger's Diplomacy and you go, speaking is better than not speaking. But,
I always think that. I don't know.
You know, we'll have to see. The speaking is fine, but I really wonder on a multilateral basis, where's Finland on this?
Yeah.
Where's Poland on this? Turkey, with the news of Mr. Erdogan and Lira doing so poorly this morning, out to 38, 36 out to 38 on domestic news in Turkey. But, you know, I don't get any sense of, I get a trend, as John Farrow mentioned there, of a real estate transactional comfort.
Right.
Bilateral comfort.
Exactly. And that's what we've come to, I guess, understand about President Trump in his first term. In his second term, he's a transactional president. There are many positives to that. There's some, in some situations where maybe it doesn't work as well. If you're a European power, let's call it Germany, France, any of the others you mentioned, Tom, this is vital to your existence. The role of Russia is going to play in greater Europe. You want a seat at the table. We'll see how that plays out going forward.
And this afternoon, a Fed meeting, a Fed press conference. Dots. It was interesting to talk to Seth Carpenter about the mystery of choosing a series of dots out 1 year, 2 years, etc.
DOTS go.
DOTS go.
Yeah,
Very good. Nailed
exactly.
that.
Boom.
If you have a terminal, you can see the layout of the dots, and you can see the change over time as the Fed adjusts their guesstimate as well. Futures up 14. Dow futures up 31. It's got a real Fed feel to it. I mean, there's just not all that much blinky on the Bloomberg launchpad right now. The VIX 21.61. The currency markets, dollar stronger, churning, but with a bit of a stronger dollar ebb. You particularly see that with Japan. Japanese yen back out near 150, 149.73. Of note, euro, Jane Foley with a 112 vision, 109.12. Stronger euro over the last couple days. Paul Sweeney mentioning sterling near 130, 129.79 as well. What do you need to know? Gold, 3,047 per ounce.
You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance on a Fed day, 1:30 p.m. We'll do the Fed decides. All of our economics. It's brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors. They are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support, future-ready technologies, growing your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. Okay, the Lumineers, Mumford & Sons, they go down to the Birchmere and they play. Joe Weisenthal's better than that.
That's right.
Got the guitar out.
That's right.
In the southeast of Washington in front of thousands.
That's right.
Yeah. What was it like?
We did, you know what? There was in the Miracle Theater, and 300 people in the audience, and I played a couple songs. So we did an Odd Lots live show, which we've done a few of over the years. Had a few interviews, a lot of fun. We interviewed Andrew Ferguson, the FTC chief. And then I sang some songs, and it was fun. It was like this old theater, and I looked around, and I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. This is a good moment in my life.
Did you have good monitors? All that matters is
I had good audio. I could hear myself well, yeah. And it was just like, I played one of them. I didn't feel like carrying my guitar down to D.C. Someone from the audience lent me a guitar. Really nice Taylor. It was a really good time.
Good. Very good. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get to the show.
Yeah, there I am.
And
there's a picture of me. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Out on YouTube. You're seeing that right now.
I look good.
Yes, can you say so yourself?
Looking good there.
It works.
It works.
I like it. And a borrowed guitar, that's always difficult.
Yeah, sounded great.
Your show coming up here, the Jones Act is something that people are totally baffled by.
Yeah.
Senator Wesley Jones,
That's
1920. How anachronistic is the Jones Act?
It's so interesting. It's a really interesting topic because the Jones Act, as you mentioned, forget the formal name of the law, but Wesley Jones. The idea is you can't ship something from a U.S. port to a U.S. port unless it's on a U.S.-built, U.S.-crewed, and U.S.-flagged carrier.
But we don't build ships
And we hardly build any. So you could imagine, say, like natural gas, if you want to ship it from Houston to New England when there's a bet, you can't do it. And so there's been this push to repeal it for a long time. And what I think is interesting is, we don't have a big shipbuilding industry, but I think it's very dug in politically. And so people don't want to kill the jobs. There's this national security element. But I think what's really interesting is it speaks to the challenge of building up domestic industries. Because no matter what your tack, whether it's sort of Biden-style industrial policy, whether it's Trump-style tariffs, you can have laws that in theory should create demand for domestic goods. And yet you don't actually end up producing them, which is what frustrates the opponents of the Jones Act so much. We have to use these ships, but we hardly build any here.
And we have all this natural gas in Pennsylvania, but for us here in the Northeast,
well,
we can't get it.
And in the Northeast, we hate pipelines.
Yes.
That's a real issue, which is that nobody likes pipeline construction in the Northeast. So we have this very weird patchwork of energy. But, and then you have these other situations where, like, in Hawaii, they might have to import oil from non-U.S. sources because there's not enough Jones Act approved ships, even though the U.S. has plenty of oil. The defenders will say this is a national security issue. We want to have high quality U.S. ship, U.S. built, U.S. Crewed ships in internal waters, and even they will say, oh, we should do other things because they recognize, no one can deny, they recognize that there isn't much of a shipbuilding industry in the United States right now. But they mostly point to the national security concern.
20 seconds. Where's Light Sweet Crude? I mean, you're shaping up your summer tour right now.
We do have a show in May. I think it's May 22nd at the 11th Street Bar. They've been really good to us.
Do you have a beer sponsor?
I got to get some. I got to reach out to Lone Star. See if they see if they'll hook us up.
Is that just in Texas, or can you pretty much?
I think that's everywhere now. It's one of those things. Texas is a cool brand, so now you can get Lone Star in Brooklyn.
Joe Weisenthal, thank you so much. I can't say enough about the effort out on Bloomberg podcast.
Thank
Tracy Alloway and Joe Weisenthal. She had a tantrum one day. She said, "I'm sorry, it's alphabetical." Tracy Alloway and Joe Weisenthal. Look for Odd Lots. It's out on Bloomberg podcast. When you subscribe there, you get us, you get them. It's a wonderful thing. Tina Turner. Nothing else to say.
You keep your mind on the money, keeping your eyes on the wall. I'm your private dancer, a dancer for money. Do what you want me to do. I'm your private dancer, a dancer for money, and any old music will do.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
The president wants lower interest rates from Chairman Powell.
You can make the argument that this is a really rich market.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
President Trump signing a wide range of executive orders.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr. We welcome you on a Fed Day, 1:30 this afternoon. We'll dive into the mysteries, the uncertainty of the dual mandate for Mr. Powell. A press conference later. That will be interesting, to say the least. Right now, futures up 12. Paul, I'm sorry, it's a Fed field. It's like the blinky on the screen. There's not much blinky going on right now.
There's not much blinky. We got the S&P up 11 points, just 0.2%. The yields are pretty steady out there, Tom. The 10-year Treasury, we're at like 4.28%.
Dollar stronger here as well. I look at the 10-year real yield, sort of the keel on my boat right now, 1.98%. I'm going to call that Midland before Fed meetings. The Sweeney yield higher, two-year yield, 4.06%. Bloomberg surveillance this morning. We're brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking, put it into your investing, wealth management, capital markets, investment banking. To the Bloomberg Business Flash, the Interactive Broker Studios, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got futures advancing on this Fed Day. Our coverage of the decision on interest rates begins at 1:30 Wall Street time. Be sure to tune in. We got NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 62 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 12 points. Dow futures, little change, up about 35. The 2-year yield, 4.06%. That's up 2 basis points. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.28%. That is little change. The Turkish Lira, the main mover in currency markets. It fell more than 10% after authorities detained President Erdogan's political rival. Right now, it's down about 3%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. Over to commodities. COMEX gold at $3,045 an ounce. We have Brent crude at $70 a barrel. WTI crude $66 a barrel. A stock to watch this morning, it's Tesla. It had about a 5% drop yesterday. Shares this morning up 3%. Leading gains among Mag 7 stocks. A few reasons why. California regulators, they granted Tesla a permit to operate ride service in the state. And on top of that, analysts at Cantor Fitzgerald, they upgraded their rating on the company. And meanwhile, the FBI, they're investigating a number of incidents where Tesla charging stations, dealerships have been vandalized. It's all tied to that growing backlash against Elon Musk's role in the Trump administration. And from cars to fashion, we take you as a new way for fashionistas to shop for Michael Kors handbags and accessories. Company lost its first official Amazon storefront. Oh, that's dangerous. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Why do you have to do that? You know,
because
you're doing
I know
that just to
Mrs.
bust
Keene
my
is
chops.
listening, and now she's
You're
on Amazon.
killing me. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. The way we roll, folks, is we need informed conversation. Coming up, Stephen Englander with Standard Chartered Bank with his just world-class view of cross rates. And we lead off stronger with Michael Kushma of Morgan Stanley, head of global fixed income, Morgan Stanley Investment Management today, with some impressive parchment as well. Where we are now in the synthesis of our political, I'm reading David Cannadine just to calm down, the giant historian from Princeton. Help Michael, where we are in our political economics, our economic politics. Did you study any of this in school?
We seem to have a new playbook that is sort of against the whole sort of economic mainstream. I've been taught for 30, 40 years of how
that's how I feel.
Economy should operate, and the idea of upturning the whole global trade system to improve manufacturing in the United States, when the United States is not the only advanced economy having falling unemployment in manufacturing. It's interesting, but there is that dilemma going all the way back to the 1960s and 70s, where Robert Triffin, that the U.S. economy has to provide dollars to the rest of the world, which generates current account deficits, which generates upward pressure on the dollar, and the U.S. economy pays a price for that. But we also gain a benefit from seigniorage. The rest of the world has to buy stuff from the U.S. It sells stuff to the U.S. and we pay it with dollars that are just dollars.
Is the underlying system snapped that supports the profit that provides comfort for fixed income?
It's more dangerous than it's been in a while. There's no doubt. There's two, as you mentioned earlier, there's two forces at work. One is the inflationary impact of trade and higher prices on things. At the same time, it's deflationary from the point of view of reducing economic growth. And the push and pull on both sides could be pretty intense in the short term. Talking about stagflation, which is a dilemma for policymakers across the board.
So, what do you expect our Federal Reserve to say today? I'm not sure we're going to get a lot in this statement. We'll look at the dots and all that kind of stuff. What do you expect them to say? Because today's a little bit different than it was a couple of months ago.
It's very different. We had markets had a very sort of benign view of the Trump policies. They're likely to be more talk than action. And they'll be walked back over time without being too disruptive over time, given some negotiations with various countries and policymakers, say, in the U.S. So we have to price in, I think the markets have priced in a more worst case outcome in terms of the inflation growth trade-off, at least for this year into next year. There are the optimists who say, well, we'll just wait till the good stuff happens next year, and deregulation, tax cuts come in, that'll happen later. We can absorb the pain now if we get good stuff later on. But the Fed has to, I think, not deviate from its data-dependent kind of view. We have to wait and see. I think there's a lot of debate whether or not they'll attach a higher weight to growth risks versus inflation risks. Should they just stay still where they are, two rate cuts priced in the dot plot this year? Should they tilt it to 3? And that will be indicative that they're more worried of the downside growth elements. But again, there's potentially growth upside next year in terms of tax cuts and things like that. So I think they'll try to be very, very data dependent in their views and wait and see, acknowledging the fact that growth is disappointing near term and inflation has also been disappointing near term, and have to wait to see how the balance plays out.
So where's the action? Where's the opportunity in the fixed income markets here? Do you just park yourself in a 2-year treasury and kind of wait and see what happens today, what happens April 2nd, maybe?
It's very tempting to do that because I think 10-year treasuries are stuck at the moment. We had a nice rally after the disappointment in the equity market. We also can't underestimate the impact of equity volatility on the fixed income market as well. And that has playing a pull, pushing yields down.
How does that work? How does that typically work, the relationship?
I think it's that balanced portfolios, the 60-40 kind of balanced portfolios are out there, and that people in very overweight U.S. equities, particularly Mag 7 stuff, and that has turned out to be quite disappointing this year, if not from the fourth quarter of last year. And that is leading to maybe too overweight equities versus fixed income.
An observation right now is we haven't had catharsis, VIX 30, whatever, however you want to measure it, because there's just an absolute wall of adult serious money going into equity, index funds, and going into fixed income as well. To me, that's almost a crutch of rationalization. How do you respond to the idea that there's millions, billions, indeed trillions just pushing into the investment?
I think that the money is there, and it's in Europe as well. I mean, Europe has very high savings rates and very high cash holdings there as well, maybe pushing European equities up at the margin. But yes, it's there. But I'm a big believer that valuations and opportunities drive asset allocation and investment. So simply because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you're just going to be out there chasing things. However, buying the dip has been the right idea for a long time. When that ceases to work, then we have a problem. Then the money will go to your treasuries and sit there.
I've never asked this. Where's the fear of missing out in bills, notes, and bonds?
I think there's not in a time when interest rates are not moving very much. We're stuck at high levels. Even the long term, the market forecast where the Fed funds rates can end up is still closer to 4 than 2, and that's a much different world than we were prior to COVID.
So how much credit risk are you taking in this marketplace these days?
I would say modest amounts. Modest amount, below average.
So you're not going. Are you in the high yield market, overweight, or in the leveraged loan market?
But we're lower than average.
Okay.
In other words, but below average, underweight versus what you do in a normal economy or a normal outlook for the world.
And was that before 2 months ago?
It's been drifting a little bit lower, particularly in investment grade and the sectors which I thought were more overvalued without a lot of positive momentum.
I mean, let me get one more in here. Is cash an asset right now for Michael Cushman?
It's been an asset for a long time. You get a positive real yield sitting in cash. That's not a bad thing. This is why one of the reasons why economies were weak in the post-global financial crisis world. That prior to that was fixed income cash generated positive. You could grow your real wealth sitting in cash. Now, you couldn't post-global financial crisis, forcing people to invest in something. Now it's returned. It's in cash.
Michael Cushman, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Michael Cushman with Morgan Stanley this morning. Waiting is Stephen Englander. For those of you on radio, you can see it on YouTube. Stephen Englander has the closest approximation. Lisa, his set looks like he's coming out of season 2 of Severance. I mean, over out on Apple TV. I mean, that's Standard Chartered's just got the Severance look going. There's no other way to put it. Stephen Englander, thank you so much for joining us here on Crossrates. I've got to digress and do an audible off of the upset in Turkish lira from 36 out to 38. They've managed the depreciation of the Turkish lira for years and years. Did that management become unmanaged this morning?
Well, I think we're living in a world in which political developments end up having a much bigger impact than we saw in the past. And I think some of the issues that are emerging with respect to the next election may be putting some pressure on the lira. At least that's market commentary right now. It's dragging down the euro and other European currencies as well.
Right. Stephen Englander, if we have a weak dollar vector in place, what's the character of it? What's the nature of a weaker dollar that we have been given right now?
Well, I think the market is seeing a lot of elements of dollar weakness. The weakness of the U.S. economy, until yesterday, kind of some sense that maybe progress was being made towards peace in between Russia and the Ukraine. the weakness in AI stocks and change in expectations in the U.S., fiscal in Europe. There's a bunch of balls in the air, and I think what's significant is that they're all, we came into the year being super positive, or the market came in being super positive on the dollar. And you sort of look at all these factors and they seem to have reversed. And so I think the market is taking a shot at selling dollars and seeing how far they can go. We don't think it's going to go much further than here. But, for now, I think the market mood is this: ask how vulnerable is the dollar?
Steve, we started the year trying to get the euro to parity for Tom Keene, but boy, we're sitting here at almost 1.09. How high does the euro go, do you think?
Honestly, we don't think it's going to go that much further, or we don't think it should go that much further. And I think that, the market, for a while when European rates were going up, you could argue that the euro hadn't responded enough to rates. Now it's responded enough to rates. The market knows the story about European fiscal stimulus, even though much of it, or if not all of it's going to be 2026 and beyond. I think that you'd have to find a new thing to justify the euro going much higher from here.
Right.
And if the U.S. is aggressive, say on tariffs on April the 2nd, that might become the old new thing and sort of lead to downward pressure on the euro and more dollar strength.
I mean, not that my head is spinning over the uncertainties out there, plural, folks, the uncertainties out there. Stephen Englander, if you had to construct a trade right now across the Standard Charter sphere from, G10 over out to legit EM, over out to frontier currencies, where's the trade right now?
Well, we've been pretty cautious on outright dollar trades.
Fair.
I mean, that it's really been a tough market.
Give me an Englander cross rate now. Give me.
No, notwithstanding, it's pulled back a bit, but say long sterling, short Swiss. I mean, the yield differential is enormous. We don't think the outlook for risk is so terrible that Swissy should have a bid. And staying within the European continent sort of keeps a lot of the dollar specific aspects out of it. So we kind of like sterling against Swiss.
This is just great.
UK economy is not great, but it's okay, and Swiss is kind of soft.
So let me explain in a real word, folks, how you do this. Dr. Englander says long Britain, short Switzerland, and you go and you type in GBP CHF, and you can do it however you want to look at it. I look back to the pandemic, and it's been in a tight trading range, Paul Sweeney, since the autumn of 2022.
Okay.
And Englander with a bold call saying sterling will break out. That's how you do it in the real terminal world.
Hey, Steve, how about the Japanese yen here? What's your view there, and what are your clients telling you?
Well, look, the market has been in and out of love affairs with the yen a couple of times over the last year. And, the last week or so, the market's sort of been cooling with respect to the yen. We still like the yen. We think the BOJ is going to hike twice this year. I'd say there's more of a risk that they do more than that they do less. Long yen, short Swiss, kind of is an interesting trade. Even against the dollar, we think that the BOJ upside surprise, because the market's not pricing much for them, bring the yen down to the low 140s.
Stephen, thank you. Stephen Englander with us. He's with the Standard Charter Bank there on the dynamics of a dollar. We're offering Shonali Basak. I hope to get her before we get to April. But she's that hard to get, folks.
I know.
This is from, thank you so much, Dan Tillis off of Queen Victoria Street. This is Ermati of UBS, Paul, saying at the Morgan Stanley European Financials Conference, he says, M&A advisory and capital raising is practically on hold, which we heard from Morgan Stanley today.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, folks, for Global Wall Street glued to this on YouTube, this is like real.
This is real, and it's all self-inflicted, and it's all within 2 months' time. And boy, how does it turn?
American exceptionalism.
What happens to the wild spirits,
Right.
the animal spirits that we thought were going to be unleashed in this U.S. economy.
I mean, you got it from Morgan Stanley today. Again, we're going to have Shonali Bassick with her wisdom on that. And Mr. Amati over in London at the Morgan Stanley European Financials. It reminds me of the exceptionalism we felt over the Detroit Lions.
Exactly.
It was sort of was very much the same feeling. The Detroit Lions are on hold right now. With our news from Detroit, Michael Barr. Good morning.
Good morning, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he'll speak by phone with President Donald Trump later today. It comes a day after Trump's conversation with Vladimir Putin failed to win Russia's commitment to a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. The White House's assertion that Putin agreed to pause attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure has been put to the test. Both countries exchanged drone attacks, including targeting energy sites. However, White House Special Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff on Bloomberg Radio and TV added new information this morning.
I have it on good information from a telephone call I had before I went on this show that President Putin issued an order within 10 minutes of his call with the president directing Russian forces not to be attacking any Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And any attacks that happened last night would have happened before that order was given. In fact, the Russians tell me this morning that 7 of their drones were on their way when President Putin issued his order, and they were shot down by Russian forces.
As for long-range hopes of a ceasefire, Zelensky today at a news conference in Helsinki urged Trump and European leaders to not give too much to Putin without security guarantees for his nation.
For us, the red line is the recognition of Ukrainian occupied territories as Russian territories. We will not agree to that.
President Zelensky through an interpreter. President Trump received a rare public rebuke from Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts after the president called for the impeachment of a federal judge who ruled against the administration. The administration is facing other judicial setbacks as well. A federal judge issued a legal blow to the administration and Elon Musk's efforts to shut down USAID, ruling that their shutdown of the foreign aid agency is unconstitutional. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Bloomberg surveillance this morning in the Michael Barr News, always brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. There are no ticket charges. There are no conflicts of your interests at ibkr.com/RIA. Thank you, Interactive Brokers, foundational support of what we do. So how do you shoot down a drone? I mean,
I don't know.
A jet or like from the ground with a 22?
I don't know how they do it exactly. Some kid in a farm. I don't know. I don't know how you do that. We had drones in New Jersey, and we can't get. I mean, they fly all over the place.
Seriously, I wonder if they like self-crash them.
I don't know.
Like they're in a.
Yeah, could be. That sounds.
They I don't. Michael Barr, thank you for that. I thought that was extraordinary. In the Witkoff interview with John
lots
Farrell.
of headlines coming off of that interview. So.
And, it's important to hear that as this story continues. Our story is Fed Day. Look for that today at 1:30 p.m. Myself, Lisa Bramowitz, John Farrell will give you a good conversation on where rates are not going. From New York City, it's Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report is brought to you by IBKR. Will U.S. natural gas production exceed 3.27 billion cubic feet in January 2025? At IBKR forecast trader, the yes recently at 9%. Check the data, spot the trends, and start predicting today at ibkr.com/forecast. We got futures posting some moves this morning. This is before the Fed's policy decision later today. Words from Chair Jay Powell. Now, the central bank expected to keep interest rates on hold and pencil in 1 or 2 cuts for this year. NASDAQ futures up 0.3%. S&P futures up 0.2%. Dow futures up 0.1%. The 2-year yield 4.03%. That's up 3 basis points. And the yield on the 10-year 4.29%. And that's up 1 basis point. With the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.3%. Shares of Kay Jeweler owners Signet Jeweler on the rise, up 17%. The company says sales are rebounding after a weak holiday. General Mills cut its guidance for fiscal 2025 sales. Its shares are off about 3%. Williams-Sonoma, let's try that again.
Nailed that.
Yes, adjusted EPS fourth quarter beat estimates, but shares are lower. They're actually down about 8%. And finally, Boeing share, tracking those on the rise, up 3%. Its CFO said March deliveries will be in line with February. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. We went out and we tried to find someone who hasn't slept in the last 90 days. Success. Brad Kleppmeyer joins us right now, Senior Portfolio Manager, Macquarie. And it's a younger, smaller ETF, the large cap growth team at Macquarie. And it's basically, it's not Mag 7 alone, but it's Mag 7-ish with some bolt-ons like Waste Connections, Intercontinental Exchange, United Health Group's in there as well. But I'm sorry, it's like what everybody's in, and we're thrilled that he could take time to join us right now. Brad, what's the last 90 days been like? Just give us a snapshot of trying to run a concentrated growthiness portfolio.
Good morning. Yeah, well, I appreciate the kindness and thinking about me. That's wonderful. Not everybody's looking out for me, but it's actually been good. And I mean good because we can talk about this later, but I think there's tons of value in concentration done in the right way. But we love this market volatility, right? Like, I think if you think about the market environment that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, it does feel a little more volatile. There's a lot more things to be concerned about. And I think that's appropriate. The market's embedding a lot of more unknowns, and that seems fair to me as a starting place.
Within the uncertainty is a persistency of free cash flow of MSFT, NVDA, AAPL, AMZ, and then the rest. Alphabet. What's the symbol? It's Google.
Yes.
Oh, it's Google, but we don't call it. We don't call it Google.
We don't call it Google. No.
Brad, is their cash flows, are they still persistent and durable?
Yeah, I think when you look across the concentration in the market, I think the starting place is a lot of these companies got here for a reason, right? Like, one of the things we think we do exceptionally well is find wide moat businesses. And if you just start breaking down these businesses, I mean, they all are wonderful businesses, highly cash flow generative. Microsoft spinning off $40 billion of free cash flow despite investing massively in these data centers and AI. I think the part of the concentration that concerns us isn't that. Most of these are high quality businesses, but when you look at a lot of the indices, the concentration is in all these names that are highly correlated from a thematic perspective, right? Like, they're all good businesses, but the market's hinged on one main thematic. And to us, that just seems a little risky. We call that blind concentration, where investors that are in maybe an index fund or something like that aren't getting the concentration that they think they're getting through a passive investment. They're actually getting an AI portfolio or a tech portfolio.
Well, that's where I wanted to go, Brad. I mean, that's where I want to go. Where are we on the AI trade here? I know a lot of the tech folks were keying on Mr. Wong's speech yesterday at their NVIDIA developer conference.
Yeah, no, that's always a great conference, and we're still digesting it. Obviously, a lot of information. Didn't seem like the market was terribly excited about it, but just on AI broadly, I guess just 3 points. It's cool stuff, right? I did some deep research last night on a pharmaceutical company that really condensed weeks of gathering clinical data into a couple of hours of interacting with my AI ChatGPT. I use Notebook LM on a regular basis. It's becoming a staple in my business analysis. These are great tools. But let's be honest, as I mentioned, the end of the market is a quasi-AI play, and that can be really good when it's good, and that can be really bad when it turns bad. I think these are behavioral finance theories in action here around FOMO and herd behavior. I think it's a risky dynamic.
Let's come back. Don't go away. Brett Kleppmeyer with us here. I did some pharmaceutical research last night. 3 aspirin. That's what I did last night. That was as close as I got. Brett Kleppmeyer with us from Macquarie here on Large Cap. We get really, really interesting conversation. We got him on much more often. We have to have on less often. She's on. It's unbelievable the amount of time she's on. Lisa Mateo.
Thank you, Don. Well, will investors stay in this wait-and-see approach ahead of the Fed's decision later this afternoon and after Tom's surveillance nap? We shall see. S&P futures kicking it off up 0.3%, 17 points, 5,632. The Dow up 0.1%, 66 points, 41,651. And the Nasdaq up 0.4%, 85 points, 17,588. We go to the 2-year yield at 4.07%. That's up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 1 basis point. With the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.3%. I have to point out COMEX Gold $3,042 an ounce. And finally, we talked about Nvidia and Tesla, whose shares turned lower yesterday. This morning, Tesla right now up 2%, Nvidia up 2% as well. That is your Bloomberg Opening Bell report. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that, at least this morning. Green on the screen right now. Fed Day. We'll see. There's not a lot of activity out there. We're waiting for 1:30 and the Fed decides. Yep. Brad Kleppmeyer with us right now with Macquarie. Brad, I noticed in the portfolio, and maybe you've dumped it all. I mean, you got Ferrari in there, please. He's only doing that so he can get to the Grand Prix. He's going down to Austin for the F1 this year. You have luxury in LVMH. We're like 2 blocks. Prada's building out. Louis Vuitton's building out. They're all building out. Bulgari's building out. Tell us about luxury as a growthy component of what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate the question on Ferrari. We don't own many car companies or ever will. I mean, we can have a long in-depth discussion about Tesla and just the automotive industry, but Ferrari is a unique animal. It produces 13,000 cars a year. Its residual values hold steady or go up. It is a luxury car, luxury brand through and through. Their number one job is to protect that brand. So we see it in a much different light. And yes, I'm not trying to get there, but they are holding their analyst day this year, and they will present their new electric vehicle this year. So we're excited. We just think it's something different than an automotive company, and we think it's actually a great business to own over the long term.
Yeah, it's been pitched to me before as a luxury brand like LVMH. It's not an auto company. I don't know how that works.
A PE of 45.
Exactly. So that's not a auto company PE.
Terry Weissman would say, "Are you kidding me?"
Exactly. Hey, Brad. So as you sit there with large cap growth, it's been such a great place to be over the last couple of years. But what's the key driver for you and your portfolio in 2025? Because boy, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, policy, if nothing else, coming out of Washington.
Yeah, I mean, you said growth has been great over the last couple of years. If it's okay, I may just add a correction that growth has been great over the last decade and a half.
You're right.
And what I would say is I think we've gotten to this mentality in the market. It really started in November 2008 and ended in 2022, right? It's called quantitative easing and free money. And I think this unprecedented wave of low rates and abundant liquidity has taught investors can't lose mentality, sort of buy the dip mentality for the last 14 years. And that's not normal. I just want to iterate that. That's not reality. That frequency of returns is not normal. And so we're winding down that easy money. The Fed's kind of backed into a corner here. And I think people are turning more towards company fundamentals and long-term durable earnings and visibility. And I think that's normal and good. So that's what we do. That's what we do as active managers and sort of this quality framework that we selected. So we're happy that business strength matters, valuations matter, discipline matters, portfolio construction matters, not leading into risk or mow. I think these are normal things, not abnormal things. So I'd say get used to it.
Brad, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. In New York, let's have you join in the studio. Brad Clapmeyer with us here with Macquarie and their large cap growth effort, I would say. The symbol on that's LRGG, Larry, Robert, George.
They're the old Delaware investment folks down in Philly.
Oh, my word.
I tracked Brad down. I know.
He was with Delaware?
Yeah, there's really smart stock jockeys down
there. Remember those
people?
They had a utility fund to die for.
Sure. Yep.
He was back.
Philadelphia was a huge institutional investor marketplace.
They were. And then Belchunas moved there, and that was the end of it. Thank you to Eric Belchunas. Just brilliant the other day on huge flows into S&P index funds. The Dow up 138 points. It is Fed Day 1:30 this afternoon. Interesting conversations from New York City. Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got stocks advancing this morning. Investors looking ahead to the Fed's policy decision for a little bit more clarity on the outlook of the economy, interest rates, a rebound in equities led by mega caps like Tesla and NVIDIA. We have Tesla up more than 3%, NVIDIA up more than 1%. So we have the NASDAQ up 0.4%, S&P 500 up 0.3%, the Dow up 0.3%. We go to the 2-year yield, 4.08%. That's up 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.30%. And that's up 1 basis point. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.3%. Few corporate highlights. We have Morgan Stanley planning to cut about 2,000 employees later this month. Then General Mills cut its guidance for fiscal 2025 sales. Its shares are down nearly 2%. Tencent Holdings outlined plans to sharply raise spending on AI infrastructure. Their ADRs up about 0.4%. And Health Equity really taking a hit, down 18% after its fraud-related costs weighed on its results. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is a real bias that I have, folks, which is that we like people with prodigious engineering chops. We get some wonderful pedigree in here. Aaron McLaughlin joins us now with the conference board. And I mean, the road interview is, what's the Fed going to do? But underneath it all is shocking competence in transportation, urban studies, and engineering. So we're doing a massive audible here with Erin McLaughlin on her massive, unique wheelhouse.
Good morning.
Why does it take so long to build anything? Paul Sweeney is out there every day looking at the tunnel over to New Jersey.
Absolutely.
Why in America does it take so long to build anything?
Permits, land acquisition, environmental regulations, not in my backyard,
but do they have
all of those things.
Do they have not in my backyard in Switzerland?
I imagine they must, although I just went to Switzerland a couple weeks ago, actually, and learned that it's smaller than my home state of Massachusetts by population. So, you know, there's a lot more homogeneous thought, perhaps, in other places in the world, as we know. I think it's really interesting that the current administration is going to speed up federal permitting, federal regulations, but we still have state permitting and regulations and lots of other bureaucracies that will slow things down. And our supply chain is physical. So this is all really relevant conversation as we talk about reshoring.
Let me get one more thing in here. Whether they're building an Intel factory somewhere, semiconductor and all that, do we have the labor to do the infrastructure you're expert at? Or do we have the labor to actually run the companies better than you do 3 miles west of Hong Kong?
It's very interesting, and that sort of lends itself to the big uncertainty. Construction labor has, I believe, the highest percentage of foreign-born workers. So my friends that are directly in the construction industry right now are seeing labor shortages be exacerbated by some of the policies. And yes, we go to surveillance construction expert Paul Sweeney here. How about that bathroom redo right now?
Oh, looking solid, although we're still waiting for a couple of things. Talk about construction. The Gateway project, the coming into the what's going to be the new Lincoln, the new tunnel, the railroads. Unbelievable what they built in just this couple years' time.
It's really cool.
Again, the progress that they've made out there building that new railroad thing in North Jersey is pretty cool. What we've been dealing with over the last couple of months, Aaron, has been economic policy coming out of Washington that we're hearing across the board, whether it's talks of tariffs or changes in immigration policies, creating a level of uncertainty out there for everybody. How do you guys reflect that in your data at the conference board? What are your companies that you talk to? What are they saying?
So our companies are members of the conference board. What we're hearing from them is, of course, uncertainty, but it is creating, I don't want to use the word paralysis, but it is creating an extreme slowdown in decision making. And that slowdown, we think, will ripple into the economy and cause an economic slowdown.
And Tom was just calling out the UBS chief executive. He's over in London. He's saying, hey, basically their M&A stuff is frozen. I mean, because people don't know what to do. How about consumer confidence? Because here in the U.S., that's 70% of our economy is kind of the consumer. What's your data showing?
So the conference board is very well known for our consumer confidence index, and it sort of dipped for the first time into what we would consider recessionary possible territory. We are not calling for a recession, but consumers are seeing what's happening around them, and they are cutting back on spending that may be discretionary.
You have 4 degrees in the active transportation and infrastructure, including Oxford University's wonderful infrastructure development and finance effort. Aaron McLaughlin, the congestion tax, do you have an opinion that won't get you in trouble with the general counsel of the conference board?
Well, I know you all were watching outside the windows, as was I, since I'm based here in Midtown Manhattan, and it certainly did ease up it seemed to work. Like anything else, after a while, it would probably have less of an impact. Folks would get, accustomed to sort of paying the fee, but congestion weighs down our economy. So there's both sides to the conversation.
Okay, they're in my ear. Ask her one question about the Fed.
Oh, yes.
What are we going to say? Is the consumer in this shutdown so broken that the Fed has to do an audible today and say, we're going to wait?
I think the Fed will wait, yes. And I think it will be interesting going forward to keep an eye on labor. Labor data will increasingly be more important this year.
Now, when you leave the building, if John Tucker or Michael Barr tackle you to look for a parking garage north of 60th Street, just run.
I will.
Call security and
Absolutely.
run. Aaron McLaughlin, thank you so much for the conference board, senior economist. And we're going to get her back on this whole infrastructure debate where everything takes forever to build. Right now, with the news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will speak with Donald Trump by phone in about a half hour, in fact, a day after Trump's conversation with Vladimir Putin failed to win Russia's commitment to a 30-day ceasefire. Zelensky struck a defiant tone, saying Ukraine will never recognize the territories currently occupied by Moscow as Russian, and that the size of his army shouldn't be a subject for talks with Putin. Through an interpreter, Zelensky urging Trump and European leaders to not give too much to Putin without security guarantees for his nation.
Well, Putin's assurances and words that he issues an order to not strike energy that is insufficient.
Zelensky spoke while visiting Finland's president in Helsinki. President Trump received a rare public rebuke from Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts after the president called for the impeachment of a federal judge who ruled against the administration. The administration is facing other judicial setbacks as well. A federal judge has ruled that the dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development likely violated the Constitution. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
This decision is specifically about USAID, but it's also the most direct ruling to date regarding whether Elon Musk's role in the Trump administration is lawful. The judge said Musk exercised significant authority reserved for officers of the United States, and that is a violation of the Constitution. The judge's order blocks Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, from any further cuts, and the judge ordered the Trump administration to restore email and computer access to all USAID employees. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And another federal judge is now blocking the president's ban on transgender troops from serving in the military. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. You know, you're in an office like we are. Is there water coolers anymore? There really isn't.
No, I don't.
I mean, Lisa's up by the...
kids are all hydrating these days.
Yeah, they're all hydrated. They're not carrying around. Do you carry around a 32-ounce or 64-ounce bottle?
24.
See, yes, she does. She's just like the kids.
I do.
It just
hydrate, like you said.
No, you're
to.
thirsty. You get something to drink. That's how it used to work. I don't know.
I agree. I mean, the offspring are walking around with these bottles. They said, you don't want to know what it costs. I said, okay.
Yeah.
We're getting into bracket stuff here. I mean, it's getting like make your picks. And, you know, I got my final four. How do you pick the points? Total final score.
Yeah.
Do you just guess?
Yes, like everything. But I've got Duke over Auburn, 160 points.
I have Duke over St. John's.
Oh, you got St. John's in the
I
final.
have no
Good for
idea
you.
how to do it. I'm just like, you know, they're like the new kids on the block. So Rick Pitino and all. How many points did you do?
I did 160.
160?
No idea. Just swagged it.
Okay, I did 148.
Okay, that's...
Ari, is 148 sound about right? Okay. Lisa, 148?
149? No? Are we going?
Okay, well, people do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lisa has to do a bracket. That's all I'm saying.
I got Michigan State, St. John's, Duke, and Purdue.
That's pretty solid.
I have to put in Purdue or I lose my job.
Yep.
That's all there is to it. Dow up 187 points. It's Bloomberg's surveillance.
You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene on Fed Day. Lift to the market. I'm not going to make much of it. VIX 21.05 in a nice amount. There's a constructive lift. I'll change my tune here. Bitcoin out $2,300, 84,000.
Wow.
I mean, it's enough for Alex Steele to come in today.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to get to Alex Steele here in a moment.
Yep.
Right now, Ira Jersey with us on fixed income. Ira, you know, it's amazing how we haven't talked much about the Fed on Fed Day. Let's do it with you. What does he not want to say today?
Well, he certainly doesn't want to say that they're definitively doing anything. And I think that the incoming data that we've had and the fact that there's a lot of doubt as to both the growth of the economy and as well as inflation and inflation expectations, I think that Powell doesn't want to rule out what the next move is going to be. You know, it's probably more edged toward easing than it is for hiking, but But nonetheless, I think that he's going to be pretty nondescript, at least when it comes to the monetary policy part of his discussion.
Irmadi of UBS, Wall Street's dead. Thank you, Dan Tillis over in London, for that. Pick of Morgan Stanley, Wall Street's dead. Thank you for that. Ira Jersey, in the short-term paper market, do you see that financing and transactions have all gummed up, have slowed down?
Well, actually, things are pretty loose right now, and in part because of what's going on with the debt limit. And I think that this has gone under the radar in like most financial circles, but it's the kind of wonky stuff that Will Hoffman and I look at all the time. So what's happened is the Treasury Department, because of the constraints it has over the debt limit, has actually paid down a lot of T-bills. So what that's meant is that people who have money, like money market mutual funds, they've gone into the repo market and actually have been funding treasuries more because there's not enough T-bills to go around. So actually funding markets are quite good right now. I think the fear is, and this is something that Jay Powell, I suspect, will discuss today, certainly if I had my question asked, that would be discussed, is what is the Fed prepared to do in order to limit volatility? Because once the debt limit is raised, that means bank reserve balances will go down very swiftly, like within a matter of a few days. And once that occurs, you could wind up seeing the volatility in funding markets that maybe you're worried about, Tom.
Ira, if I were there in the audience and not Michael McKee, I would ask Fed Chairman Jay Powell, what can the Fed do to try to counteract some of the uncertainty that's been brought into this market in terms of growth outlook, inflation outlook, just in the past couple of months? Does he have an answer for that, or does he sidestep that?
Well, they're going to have some answer for that, in part because we do get a new summary of economic projections today. So we'll have new inflation forecasts, growth forecasts, unemployment forecasts, and of course that infamous dot plot. And so all of those things I think are designed, and they hope will add some certainty, at least on a monetary policy perspective.
Ira, thank you so much. Ira Jersey with Bloomberg Intelligence on fixed income, getting to the Fed today. Alex walked in, total cow. She says, Tom, you haven't mentioned Cubs-Dodgers in Tokyo all morning.
Totally. It was so messed up, you guys.
Ohtani, home run. How cool is that? Home run in Tokyo for Mr. Ohtani.
Fired up over there, I'm sure.
He walked twice. I count a walk as a hit. Do you?
Yeah,
Alex,
I wouldn't pitch
do you
to him.
count a walk as a hit?
No, it's not a hit. Hit, by definition, is you hit something.
So old school.
A walk is because the pitcher couldn't get it done.
I'm saying he was 3 for 3.
Yeah.
Because I'm taking the 2 walks as a single.
On base percentage.
3 for 3. Yep. And with a home run. I mean, it's what the people paid for.
Yeah, I mean, how good is? I mean,
it's just
a
very
brilliant
cool
move.
Haven't people been going over to Japan to see these games?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that like a thing
Sure.
where it's actually bringing in a ton of tourist money?
Yeah, but you missed it yesterday because you weren't listening.
Yes.
We said in the NFL, lots of Americans go to London, but I thought it was very much Japanese.
Yeah.
In Tokyo, I mean, it's huge over there.
I love Tokyo.
I think I'm sorry. I can see you, me, Alex, the team rolling A&A or whatever to Japan.
Right over.
I've never been. I really want to go.
It's great. Oh, it's spectacular.
I'm dying to go.
Go to Kyoto.
That's my dream place.
It is. We'll talk about it.
Sold.
My dream place is front row seats for Stevie Nicks. She is out touring with Waddy. What can you say? Good morning, everyone. It's Fed Day.